Chapter 4474. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly. Her long and narrow eyes rippled with a faint glow. It's true. 3 words were clearly spat out from her lips. Ren Jiaming was stunned. It was until the young lady continued to walk forward when he regained his senses. Aren't you afraid that I have ulterior motives towards you? Yiqing Luo's footsteps didn't stop this time. She continued to walk forward, but her voice was clearly transmitted into his ears. Although, you're not very reliable, but I don't believe you. Believe? Ren Jiaming's heart felt as though something had exploded. He stared blankly at Yiqing Luo's departing figure. Agitation and indescribable emotions filled his heart. After leaving Ren Jiaming's courtyard, Yiqing Luo then asked Gu Yun to bring her to the Gu residence's warehouse, since she wanted to save someone. Then she had to go take a look at what medicinal herbs were in the Gu residence's warehouse. When Gu Yun brought them to the warehouse, Gu Yun's eyes widened. Outside the warehouse, there was actually an orderly team of guards guarding. Gu Yun went up and said something to that team of guards. Then she returned to Yiqing Luo's side. Eldest miss, after entering the warehouse, I need you to show them the Bone Lord's token. Yiqing Luo took out the token and threw it to that team of guards. The solemn and serious guards instantly went crazy. This was the token which represented the master of the Gu residence. Even if he didn't treat it as a treasure, shouldn't he treat it with respect? How could he throw it away just like that? He caught the token in a flurry. The guard leader couldn't help but check the token carefully before he believed that the token was real. Yiqing Luo took back the token and entered the warehouse alone. She tossed the token in her hand, and her fingertips rubbed the top 2 times. Until now, she still didn't understand the reason why Bloodbone Barbaric King passed the token to her. And that sentence which he asked Gu Yun to pass to her, what did it mean? What was called? She wanted to ask him the answer. Could she find the answer from this token? How would he know what she wanted to ask? A token. How was it going to answer her question? She was really annoyed with this kind of behavior, not being able to say it out directly. Yiqing Luo stuffed the token into the profound phoenix ring and inserted it into the warehouse. The warehouse of the Gu residence was indeed a place that required a group of guards to guard. Even though she was used to seeing rare treasures, she still couldn't help but click her tongue. There were countless rare treasures. As if they were free, they filled up the entire space. Yiqing Luo's goal was to head directly towards the medicinal ingredients section. When she saw those medicinal herbs, Yiqing Luo had the impulse to ransack this place clean. She saw many rare medicinal herbs that she had never seen before in the 100 refining pills. Just like those medicinal herbs that only appeared once every 1,000 years, there was a huge pile of them. What a nouveau riche! Yiqing Luo resisted the urge to stretch out her hand and slowly looked over. The more he looked, the more his blood boiled. They couldn't wait to compare all the medicinal herbs they knew with these medicinal herbs and study them. If only Master Ghost Doctor was here. He could probably stay here for a few years before he was willing to leave the warehouse. He was watching along the way. For a moment, he did not notice his feet. A protruding object bumped into her foot. Yiqing Luo staggered as she fell forward. Her reaction was swift as she steadied herself, avoiding the consequence of falling flat on her face. If she fell. Chapter 4475. Yiqing Luo turned her head back to see what had tripped her. She lowered her head to take a look. It was a wooden box. It looked old and covered with dust. Yiqing Luo leaned over. Although there were many rare treasures in the Gu residence's warehouse, so much that it made one dazzled. But every single item was neatly placed. Why would there be a wooden box in this medicinal herb area? But something that would appear in the Gu residence's warehouse. It was definitely a treasure. Yiqing Luo lifted her leg and gave it a kick. She didn't hear any sound from inside. Yiqing Luo didn't smell any strange smell from the box. She tentatively stretched out her hand and poked the wooden box. After confirming that there were no hidden weapons in the wooden box, she then moved the wooden box in front of her. She raised her palm, and the profound wave rippled, blowing away the thick layer of dust on top of the wooden box. The rectangular wooden box had an extremely complicated and ceremonial totem on top, winding around the entire box. Yiqing Luo's fingertip rubbed on the totem. If she didn't see it wrongly, these totems seemed to be similar to the totems on the murals of the Divine Emperor that she had seen before, but they were different in approach. But if she looked closely, it wasn't similar at all. There was a kind of imitation feeling. Yiqing Luo picked up the wooden box and sized it up. There was no lock on the wooden box, but she couldn't open it no matter what. Strange and strange. Yiqing Luo turned the wooden box over and over, checking it thoroughly. She couldn't find a way to open the box. Yiqing Luo might as well throw the wooden box into the profound phoenix ring. Forget it, bring it out first, and ask Xian when he returns. She had just kept the wooden box. Just as she was about to get up, out of the corner of his eye, he was suddenly blinded by a bright light from a certain spot. That was the direction where she had tripped over the wooden box and almost fell. If she had really fallen onto the ground, she might have discovered. From that corner, a faint and bright light shone out. Light? In the warehouse, every area was illuminated by luminous pearls. Coincidentally, the luminous pearls in the medicinal herb area were placed closer to the front. The position where Yiqing Luo was standing now, the light wasn't that bright. Because of that, the light in the corner was slightly more obvious. Yiqing Luo raised her brows slightly. Could it be that someone wanted to dig a tunnel and steal something from the warehouse? No, if there really was something, the group of guards outside the door would have noticed it immediately. Yiqing Luo thought for a moment and walked towards the direction of the light. Just as he approached, she furrowed her brows. The light came from a hole about the size of a fingertip in the corner of the wall. And when she just got close, from the entrance of the cave, he felt it was an extremely weak response. F*CK. It was Qi Yin. This feeling made Yiqing Luo go into a daze. After that guy was thrown out by DMO Xian last night, he didn't return to her pet space. It's just a bird. Where did it go to wander? Yiqing Luo leaned towards the entrance of the cave and looked over against the light. On the other side of the cave, the candlelight flickered and it was a little dim. A slender figure was elongated under the flickering candlelight. Swaying, he walked towards a certain place step by step. The feeling of the shadow, staggering, made Yiqing Luo feel a little strange. Following the footsteps of that figure, the candlelight illuminated the surroundings. Yiqing Luo saw it clearly. That was a treacherous and eerie ancestral hall. Countless tablets, under the illumination of the candlelight, appeared extremely treacherous. Bone Residence, Ancestral Hall? Yiqing Luo raised her brows in interest. Bone Lord was really someone from the Heaven Realm. Chapter 4476. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many tablets in the Gu Residence's Ancestral Hall. But that figure, who was he? Why did he appear in the Gu Residence's Ancestral Hall? And Qi Yin, that bastard. Why was he in the Gu Residence's Ancestral Hall? Yiqing Luo's gaze swept across the surroundings but didn't see any trace of Qi Yin. She frowned and used her consciousness to call out to Qi Yin. Both her divine sense was actually blocked by a barrier. She couldn't communicate with Qi Yin at all. This kind of situation, Qi Yin must have done it on purpose to cut off the spiritual link between them. What on earth was he trying to do? Yiqing Luo searched around. She didn't find any place from the warehouse to the Ancestral Hall. She couldn't possibly break through this place, right? She probably hadn't reached the Ancestral Hall yet. She would be taken away by the team of guards outside. Moreover, there were so many rare treasures here. Break through the warehouse. These precious medicinal herbs would be lost. Yiqing Luo decided to leave the warehouse and find Gu Yun to understand more before heading to the Ancestral Hall openly. Just as she was about to leave, coincidentally, the figure in the Ancestral Hall slowly turned around. A strange and horrifying face appeared in Yiqing Luo's pupils. The candle flame flickered, contrasting with the curved black blood on that face. She could even vaguely see the eerie white bones with black chi. That face. It couldn't be called a face anymore. Bai Mei. That face was exactly the Bai Mei who didn't have any young lady skin on. Didn't she throw Bai Mei into the room guarded by the Gu residence's secret guards? She even specially placed the jade pendant which had Bai Su's consciousness in the room, so that the two sisters could have a good talk. How did Bai Mei appear here? Yiqing Luo's heart suddenly thumped. Bai Mei would absolutely not take such a big risk and run to the Gu residence's ancestral hall for no reason. Especially she didn't even bother to conceal her own face. To Bai Mei, appearance was everything she insisted on. Yiqing Luo dismissed the idea of letting Gu Yun lead her to the Gu residence's ancestral hall. If she swaggered over, it would only attract Bai Mei's attention. She wanted to see what Bai Mei was trying to do. The ancestral hall wasn't big. Yiqing Luo could see Bai Mei's every move clearly from this hole. Bai Mei's steps were obviously very unsteady. However, he still forced himself to walk around the ancestral hall. It seemed to be searching for something. He walked around the ancestral hall and searched around it. Bai Mei seemed to be a little impatient. That terrifying face of his was distorted. He quickened his pace. She hurriedly walked around the ancestral hall once more. Even the spirit tablets on the table were carefully examined. Finally, he bent down and crawled under the table where the memorial tablets and offerings were placed. Again, there was nothing. She angrily crawled out from under the table. He did not care about the dust on his clothes. With a twisted face, he bared his teeth and glared angrily as he searched the surroundings once more. His movements became much more violent. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she was rather curious. What was Bai Mei looking for in the Gu residence's ancestral hall? Bai Mei could be considered a member of the Palace of Darkness now. Her current actions should be a mission issued by the Palace of Darkness. Only the Palace of Darkness could intervene to help. Bai Mei, who was already at Heaven's Boundaries Ridge, surrounded by various powerhouses and was on the verge of death, was able to avoid the Gu residence's secret guards and escape from the room. Chapter 4477. Yu Palace wanted Bai Mei to search for something in the Gu residence's ancestral hall. Yiqing Luo stared at it for a while longer. After Bai Mei searched a few rounds, her emotions became more and more irritable. But she didn't give up as she continued searching in the ancestral hall. Where on earth is this damn thing? Bai Mei clenched her teeth and spat out the words. She clenched her fist and slammed it on the ground. She didn't know what she had punched. She cried out in pain as she immediately hugged her own hand and stood up abruptly, raising her hand in front of her eyes to check. But her actions were too rough and swift. The moment she stood up, she suddenly knocked against the cabinet by the side. The memorial tablets on the table immediately swayed and fell to the ground with a pitter-patter. The sound of things crashing and falling was extremely clear in the quiet ancestral hall. Who is it? There's a sound from the ancestral hall. Let's go over and take a look. Outside the warehouse, Yiqing Luo could faintly hear the anxious voice of the guards. Bai Mei, who was in the ancestral hall, naturally heard these words. Her eyes sunk under the flickering candlelight. That face became even more twisted and terrifying. She quickly stood up and wanted to escape from the ancestral hall. But the next moment, in that fallen memorial tablet, a faintly discernible glow flickered. Even though it was separated by a wall, Yiqing Luo could clearly feel a burst of profound wave coming from the memorial tablet. Bai Mei apparently sensed this as well. There was an obvious change in her gaze. She suddenly grinned as her eyes revealed a greedy desire. Finally found it. Bai Mei totally disregarded the fact that there were guards rushing over. She speedily dashed towards the direction of that faint glow. Could that be the thing that Bai Mei was looking for? She must not let her get her way. Yiqing Luo's feet moved as she immediately dashed out of the warehouse. The guards outside the door had yet to speak to Yiqing Luo. They saw Yiqing Luo's figure was like lightning as she dashed toward the other end of the warehouse. But which was the instance when Yiqing Luo dashed out of the warehouse? In the dim ancestral hall, a fiery red little figure dashed out speedily. Just as Bai Mei was about to come into contact with that dim light, the raging flames that were mixed with boundless, profound energy swept in front of Bai Mei. She blocked Bai Mei's way, and the remaining power of the raging flames was shocking. The memorial tablets on the table fell to the ground. "Get lost," Bai Mei shouted in a hoarse voice. She glared at the palm-sized bird that was spreading its wings and bared her fangs. Qi Yin sneered. "You dare to do little things behind the master of this sacred beast. This sacred beast will burn you." It flapped its wings fiercely. The hurricane swept over. When he arrived in front of Bai Mei, the hurricane suddenly turned into 2 fire dragons. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws at Bai Mei. In an instant, Bai Mei's soft black hair curled up from the heat of the raging flames. Bai Mei's face contorted when she smelled the burning smell. She grabbed at her hair with both hands. After feeling the burnt roots of the hair, his entire face was filled with a strong, murderous aura. Bang! Bai Mei's palm wind surged as a thick black qi filled the entire space. Qi Yin swiftly evaded it. As the phoenix feathers moved, they flickered with a colorful, fiery light. After it was thrown out by the Overlord, it saw Bai Mei sneakily circling around the Gu residence. It had been following Bai Mei. Chapter 4478. Indeed, this woman was trying to do something behind Yi Qing Luo's back. Qi Yin flapped its wings and flew upwards. It wanted to settle this woman with its own power. Then it would bring this woman back and let the Overlord know how powerful it was. Humph! Let's see when he casually throws it. How would its master beat him up? Just as it was thinking about this, a gust of black yin qi, like a dense spider web, started to wrap around everything in its surroundings. Qi Yan's little body was still in the midst of its complacent imagination when it suddenly crashed into the yin qi. In an instant, a hole was corroded on the phoenix feathers, which were like flowing light. Qi Yin cried out in pain. It spat out a flame from its mouth. It tried to disperse all the yin qi around it. Unfortunately, the layers of yin energy simply couldn't burn through the barrier at all. Instead, it went against the flame, which it spat out and wrapped around it. It was like a bloody mouth which was open wide. Scarlet flames, scarlet eyes widened, and a mournful cry came from its sharp mouth. What kind of ghostly yin qi was this? It was actually so strange. Its flame actually had no way to disperse or purify this ball of yin qi. One must know that its flame was able to cleanse any darkness in the world. But the yin qi, which was released from Bai Mei's body, was totally useless. How was this possible? Bai Mei's body was absolutely filled with yin qi, absolutely filled with the darkness of this world. Why did its flame have no effect on Bai Mei? Stinky bird, just based on you and you want to stop me? Bai Mei's horrifying face twisted as she sneered. Her 5 fingers turned into a sharp blade, which was wrapped by the yin qi, sharp and filled with a chilling, murderous aura, directly grabbing towards Qi Yin. Qi Yin was entangled by the layers of yin qi and couldn't move at all. It endured the pain of its wings being corroded by the yin qi and flapped its wings with all its might. Ah! Qi Yin was in so much pain that its phoenix feathers stood erect. Seeing the sharp yin qi coming straight at him, he felt a chill run down his spine. Qi Yin was so anxious that its phoenix feathers fluttered violently as it floated to the ground. It was one of the 4 holy beasts, the holy beast vermilion bird, yet it was about to die at the hands of a lowly human. It shouldn't have tried to be brave. He shouldn't have acted on his own before his strength had returned to its peak. Master, hurry up and save your bird. If you don't save the bird, you won't have a bird anymore. Qi Yin kept howling in his heart. He had not expected that before he died, he wasn't thinking about his 3 brothers, but Yi Qing Luo, Bai Mei. It was a slightly cold voice that emitted a chilling intent. In this quiet ancestral hall, it was treacherous and sinister. After that, the door to the ancestral hall was suddenly kicked open. In front of Bai Mei's eyes, an afterimage that looked like a sunset flashed past. He felt a dull pain in his chest as he was sent flying by a powerful force. The young girl was dressed in a fiery red robe, and she exuded a noble and lofty aura. Bai Mei felt a sharp pain in her chest. She looked at the newcomer in disbelief. His gaze collided with the girl's cold and disdainful gaze. She only felt that she had been despised by Yi-Ching Luo. "How dare you touch my beast?" The young girl's pink lips curled up coldly as her smile was like a blooming poppy. Immediately after, she didn't look at Bai Mei. Her body turned slightly. She stretched out both her hands towards Qi Yin, who was entangled by the yin qi. Wherever her hand went. Chapter 4479. Just like the purification function, she rescued Qi Yin from the dense, evil qi. Her fingers touched the place where Qi Yin was corroded by the evil qi. There was a hint of coldness in her eyes. There was a bit of fierceness and sharpness in it. She held Qi Yin in her arms. Her cold and charming eyes were slightly raised, and her gaze fell on Bai Mei. Her eyes met. Her pink lips curled up slightly. Her tone was cold, but there was an invisible, noble elegance. "Bai Mei, since you want to die then, I will fulfill your wish." Her tone, and the expression between her eyebrows were completely like looking down at Bai Mei. This kind of cognition made Bai Mei's heart give birth to a deep sense of shame and annoyance, especially looking at Yi-Ching Luo's high and mighty attitude, completely stepping on her expression. She couldn't wait to tear Yi-Ching Luo into pieces. Yi-Ching Luo lowered her eyes and looked at the curled-up ball in her arms, completely without the arrogant look in the past. The coldness in her eyes was even worse. Cold to the bone. Even the aura around her was cold to the extreme. Under this gloomy ancestral hall, as if there was a gust of cold wind blowing. But Qian in her arms seemed to not feel this bone-chilling coldness at all, like finally hiding in a safe place that could make it feel at ease. The whole beast was relaxed. "Bai Mei, for the sake of my sister, I have let you off too many times." Yi-Ching Luo caressed Qi Yan's phoenix feathers. Her fingertips were still stained with a few strands of fluff that fell from Qi Yan's body. Bai Mei's eyes seemed to be stained with poison. "Don't be so hypocritical. After all, you're just deliberately forcing yourself in front of the Overlord, pretending to be good and kind." Bai Mei didn't appreciate it at all. In her heart, Yi-Ching Luo was completely because DMO Xian couldn't bear to let her die, so it was not easy to kill her. Yi-Ching Luo gave a puffed sound and laughed in a low voice. In the laughter, it was treacherous and frightening. "I didn't expect that in your eyes. I am a beautiful and kind woman. I am so embarrassed." As she spoke, her fingertips purified all the yin qi on Qi Yan's body. Then, she put Qi Yan back into the pet space. After doing this, Yi-Ching Luo then swung her hand and curled her thin lips frivolously. "Now tell me, how do you want to die? Do you really think that you can kill me?" Bai Mei clenched her fists tightly. Her terrifying face was contorted with wrinkles. The blackened flesh and blood were squeezed together in layers. It looked very disgusting. Yi-Ching Luo's eyes revealed a look of disgust as she shot a glance toward the tightly shut main door of the ancestral hall. "Don't worry, before we die, this door will not be opened and those guards will not come in to disturb us. We can slowly play." The disgust in the young girl's eyes deeply pierced Bai Mei's heart. How could she not tell that Yi-Ching Luo was disgusted with her face? If it wasn't for Yi-Ching Luo, if it wasn't for that bitch, how could her face become like this? That slut actually dared to dislike her. She also wanted to let that slut have a taste of being disfigured. Bai Mei's body and mind were already twisted as the gaze she shot at Yi-Ching Luo was filled with intense hatred. If the door of the ancestral hall was not opened, then so be it. Yi-Ching Luo thought that she wanted to escape from the main entrance. Did she really think that she was an idiot? Leave from the main entrance. The minute she left, wouldn't she be caught by the Gu residence's secret guards? Ha, idiot! Bai Mei clenched her fists tightly as her peripheral vision shot a glance towards the ancestral hall's cabinet. Following that, she leapt upwards. Download address. Phone reading. Chapter 4480. A sinister black qi shot out from Bai Mei's palm. The dense, profound glow merged with the sinister qi. Following that, a dense and horrifying attack was unleashed directly towards Yi-Ching Luo's face. Huff, huff, huff. The frenzied, profound glow slapped everything around it. The only table in the ancestral hall also made a crashing sound from the impact. The spirit tablets, which had fallen onto the ground, were also knocked against each other. Yi-Ching Luo squinted her eyes slightly as she speedily avoided Bai Mei's attack. The glower flame fan on her fingertips opened up as a burst of profound wave collided with Bai Mei's attack. But Bai Mei had no intention to continue fighting with Yi-Ching Luo. After she had unleashed a powerful offensive, she suddenly felt a chill down her spine. She speedily turned around and dashed towards the table where the spirit tablets were placed. On the table, the faint, profound glow was still faintly flickering. Bai Mei took a few steps forward and dashed over. Her hand pressed on that piece of table. Feeling the faint glow inside and the profound chi which was emitted, she couldn't help but twitch her lips as she looked towards the front where the profound wave was surging. Yi-Ching Luo, do you really think that you can make me stay? TSK, TSK, TSK. Wait till I get my hands on this thing. I will kill you, kill you. She laughed maniacally as her hand had already stretched out towards that faint glow. Just at this moment, suddenly, a slender hand was placed on Bai Mei's wrist. Aren't you hooting about how powerful you are? Why are you trying to escape? Not knowing when, the young lady had already broken through that profound glow and stood in front of her. Bai Mei was stunned for a moment. Yi-Ching Luo, when did she rush over? Do you think that I can't tell what your motive is? Yi-Ching Luo laughed lightly. Don't be silly, I've said this before. You're the one who asked for it, so you should bear the consequences. Bai Mei intentionally unleashed a terrifying and extreme cold attack, just to attract her attention, and then she left quietly. She would rush to the ancestral hall. It was because Bai Mei had discovered the dim light on the cabinet in the ancestral hall. That was obviously what Bai Mei was looking for. How could she possibly let her guard down? At the moment when Bai Mei moved, a figure suddenly appeared. She immediately sensed Bai Mei's intention. Yi-Ching Luo's fingertips suddenly tightened as her lips curled into an arc, adding a tinge of treacherous coldness. Bai Mei, why don't you tell us? What mission has the Palace of Seclusion arranged for you? Bai Mei's horrifying face contorted in pain. Bitch, let go of me. Ah! She suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Yi-Ching Luo's hand, which was clasping her arm, suddenly increased her strength, and only a kacha sound was heard as her bones were broken. Why can't you be obedient? Yi-Ching Luo smiled so much that her brows were filled with a sinister air. Prisoners shouldn't flaunt their momentary happiness. You might feel good with your mouth, but your body will have to suffer. This time, Bai Mei was very obedient. Gritting his teeth, he didn't dare to say another word. Yi-Ching Luo was still smiling. Have you thought it through? Do you want to answer my question? She paused as her vision shot towards Bai Mei's face. After all, this face of yours is rather scary. I'm afraid that I will have nightmares at night if I grab onto you like that. Bai Mei's vicious and venomous gaze suddenly stared at Yi-Ching Luo. But at the next moment, she seemed to have thought of something. An indistinct cold glint flashed past her venomous eyes. Not waiting for Yi-Ching Luo to react, Bai Mei suddenly straightened her body as she pounced towards Yi-Ching Luo. That blackened flesh face was reflected in Yi-Ching Luo's pupils at a close distance. Hurry up and read the latest updates. Download address. Cell phone reading. Chapter 4481. This action made Yi-Ching Luo stunned for a moment, no matter who it was. At the sight of such an ugly face sticking to his own, all of them would be shocked, right? It was Yi-Ching Luo's days that gave Bai Mei a chance. She speedily broke free from Yi-Ching Luo's restraint. Her hands swiftly pressed down on the faint light. Yi-Ching Luo wanted to stop her, but it was too late. When Bai Mei's hand pressed on the faint light, that faint light, which was so weak that it could not be seen, suddenly burst forth with a dazzling light. The entire ancestral hall was lit up by this ray of faint light. Bai Mei grinned as she laughed maniacally at Yi-Ching Luo. Don't you dare to stop me. Yi Qing Luo, wait for me to return. It will be your death date. The lady's maniacal laughter was filled with complacency, as though she was ridiculing Yi Qing Luo, as though she had no way to deal with her. That dazzling light made Yi Qing Luo unable to get near. Her intuition told her that an ominous premonition was surging in her heart towards this dazzling light. Her brows creased tightly as she stared at Bai Mei without blinking. As expected, the next moment, Bai Mei's maniacal laughter suddenly stopped. Immediately after, she let out a miserable shriek. His face, which was covered in blood and flesh, was extremely obvious under the resplendent light. It was twisting continuously. The flesh was wriggling. It was sinister and terrifying, as though it was suffering from extreme pain. She looked at Yi Qing Luo pleadingly. Save me. Save me. Yi Qing Luo didn't move. Bai Mei struggled even more frantically as she tried to remove her hand from the cabinet. But the resplendent faint light was like a huge suction cup, firmly sucking her in. It was like a wide-open bloody mouth, as though it was going to swallow her whole. Apparently, Bai Mei had also realized this, that strong suction force and the intense pain from the light penetrating her body. Something was obviously wrong. This was totally different from what the palace lord had said. He had obviously said that as long as she found the secret hidden in the Gu residence's ancestral hall, she would be able to find out the bone lord's secret through that secret. Secluded palace would give her an even stronger power, powerful enough to let her humiliate Yi Qing Luo. Why did this strange, profound light in the ancestral hall of the Bone Estate have a feeling that it wanted to treat her as a sacrifice? Bai Mei was terrified and uneasy. His body continued to struggle and tremble. Yi Qing Luo, save me. If the sovereign knows that you watch me die, he won't forgive you. He won't forgive you. Bai Mei screamed at Yi Qing Luo in a heart-wrenching manner. As long as Yi Qing Luo lent a hand, she pushed Yi Qing Luo into this dim light. Let Yi Qing Luo become the sacrificial offering. But no matter how she howled at the top of her lungs, pulling at DMO, Xian, and Bai Su. Even so, the girl's expression didn't change in the slightest. Yi Qing Luo stood quietly by the side with her arms crossed over her chest. Her beautiful face was calm and indifferent. The corner of her lips curled up, and the sarcasm in her eyes was obvious. Dim light filled the entire ancestral hall. Bai Mei let out a blood-curdling scream. A dazzling light suddenly flashed. Yi Qing Luo only saw an extremely faint shadow in the light, slowly disappearing. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows. Bai Mei, suddenly, a painful cry was heard from outside the ancestral hall. The main door of the ancestral hall was opened. An illusory shadow swiftly floated in. The dim light that filled the sky and the gradually disappearing shadow were reflected in the eyes of the shadow. Chapter 4482. Bai Mei, that figure floated in mid-air as it trembled slightly. Immediately after, it flew towards the dim light. Yi Qing Luo swung her glower flame fan in time and drew out a profound wave, blocking her path. And it was in this instance. The figure in the resplendent dim light was completely swallowed and disappeared. Bam! A deafening explosion was heard from outside the ancestral hall. The majestic, profound wave was unscrupulously colliding in the air. Who is it? Dare to barge into the Gu residence? Looking for death. Men, stop her. Outside the ancestral hall, a commotion was heard. Yi Qing Luo could obviously feel the thick, profound yin qi filling the entire space. It was the people from the Palace of Darkness. They actually dared to barge into the Gu residence at this juncture. Weren't they afraid that the various powerhouses surrounding the Gu residence would shift their target to the Palace of Darkness? Yi Qing Luo looked at Bai Su, who was sprawled on the ground as her figure was faintly discernible, as though she was about to be blown away by the wind. She frowned. Bai Mei is already dead. No matter how sad you are, it's no use. If you want to keep your soul, then go somewhere else to be sad. Bai Su tilted her head slightly. The gaze which she shot towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with a sliver of disapproving coldness. But it was only for a moment, and it was replaced by pain. That smear of coldness, Yi Qing Luo took it all in. But she didn't have too many emotions towards this. She only calmly stated the truth. I just don't want Xian to be sad, so I reminded you. Whether you want to go somewhere else to be sad is your own business. After Yi Qing Luo finished her words, she didn't bother about Yi Qing Luo anymore. Instead, she turned around and looked at the entrance of the ancestral hall. Outside the door, there were about 20 black-robed Palace of Darkness disciples, fighting with the Gu residence's guards. A tall figure speedily rushed in. That person's eyes under the black robe looked deeply at Yi Qing Luo, but he didn't have any interaction with her, as he walked directly towards the direction of the table. Yi Qing Luo's feet moved, and in a flash, she stood in front of that person as she stretched out her hand to stop him. Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. You should understand the logic of first come, first served, right? Don't get involved in the matters of the Bone Palace. The Palace Master of Netherworld Palace stopped in her tracks. Her voice, which had been changed by profound energy, was exceptionally hoarse. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose. What a pity. I'm after all the eldest young miss of the Gu residence, and I'm already deeply involved in it. Listen to me. This has nothing to do with you. I don't want to hurt you. The Palace Master's tone was a bit depressed. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards. What are the people behind the Secluded Darkness Palace searching for in the Gu residence? If I'm satisfied with your answer, I might consider giving way. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace fell silent. Under the black robe, the pair of dark eyes faintly flashed a trace of coldness. Yi Qing Luo acutely sensed the change in the other party's emotions. He raised his eyebrows curiously. I haven't seen him for a while. It seemed like something had changed in him. Don't force me. The Palace Master of Netherworld Palace's tone had also sunk. It looked like the person behind the scenes in the Secluded Darkness Palace had sensed him and had repeatedly sent the message to her. Or perhaps he had helped her several times, which infuriated the person behind the scenes. This was also good they were originally not on the same line. If she owed too many favors, by then when she stood on the battlefield, she would be too embarrassed to go all out. The smile on Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a gorgeous arc. She took a step to the side as she opened up a path. Following that, she tilted her head as she smiled and said, "All right, on account that you've helped me before. Shall not stop you." Chapter 4483. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace looked at her suspiciously for a while, as though he was suspecting what tricks she was up to. What secrets does the Gu residence have? I don't even know about it. This is all your palace is doing. Yi Qing Luo spread out her hands. I who know nothing, what tricks can I play? The palace lord remained silent for a moment as he walked towards the table. After 2 steps, he turned back to look at Yi Qing Luo. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's arms crossed, smiling at him, he indeed had no intention to stop her. The brows under the black robe frowned slightly. He didn't hesitate any further as he turned and walked towards the table. The dazzling glow was still flickering. Each and every one of the spirit tablets under that glow seemed to be plated with a layer of Qi. When he walked over, that dazzling glow didn't engulf him like how it engulfed Bai Mei. It looked like Bai Mei was really a sacrificial offering that the palace lord pushed out. After offering this sacrificial offering, the hidden secret door under the Gu residence's ancestral hall was opened. When the palace lord walked to the place where the glow was, he suddenly stopped as he looked sideways at Yi Qing Luo. He stared at Yi Qing Luo for a long time. Following that, he spoke in a gloomy voice. Yi Qing Luo, I really don't wish to hurt you, so don't get involved in any matters of the Gu residence. Saying that, his palm pressed on the place where the glow was. Following that, his figure suddenly disappeared before Yi Qing Luo's eyes. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose, something that the palace lord needed. Of course she was interested, only allowed the palace lord to be wary of her things time and time again. Couldn't she snatch the palace lord's things instead? Yiqing Luo started walking towards the place where the glow was. Yiqing Luo. Baisu's ethereal voice was heard from behind. Yiqing Luo stopped and looked at Baisu. Baisu slowly straightened up. That beautiful face was haggard and in pain. She, really? Right? Yiqing Luo replied without hesitation. She's dead, dead in front of us. It wasn't because she was cruel, but because of this, Baisu had to accept the reality. Actually, it was good that Bai Mei died like this. At least, she deserved it. There was no one to blame. She did not feel sorry for Baisu. There was no need to make things difficult for DMO Xian just because of the relationship between Baisu and DMO Xian. You can save her. Baisu's voice was hoarse and low. It was so fleeting that if Yiqing Luo didn't listen carefully, she might not be able to hear the sentence. It could be seen that Baisu was at a loss when she said that. Yiqing Luo pursed her pink lips as the expression on her face turned solemn. Yes, I can save her, but why should I save her? Baisu didn't know how to answer Yiqing Luo's question. Yiqing Luo continued. You know very well that I wish for her to die. Because of Xian, I will not kill her, but I will not save her either. Although he knew that Yiqing Luo's words were reasonable. However, Baisu's body still trembled uncontrollably. Yiqing Luo's expression remained calm. Moreover, you know very well what kind of person your sister is. If I really save her, then the person who died now would be me. How could she not tell that when Bai Mei asked for help? Her eyes were filled with schemes and viciousness. When Baisu heard that, she suddenly raised her head. She opened her mouth to refute, but when the words reached her mouth, there was no way to refute. Chapter 4484. That was right. If Yiqing Luo were to strike, Bai Mei would definitely drag Yiqing Luo to death together. The reason why Bai Mei was able to survive till now was not because of her infatuation with DMO Xian. Instead, her hatred towards Yiqing Luo. But even if he knew this, he watched as Bai Mei disappeared from his sight. Baisu still could not calm down. If it wasn't Yiqing Luo's fault, she really wasn't able to be so carefree. I don't care what you think. Yiqing Luo's expression was very indifferent, without much emotion. If you feel that hating me can erase the guilt in your heart, then go ahead and hate me. After that, Yiqing Luo didn't care about Baisu's expression and walked straight towards the dim light. Baisu's soul sense shook a few times, and she wanted to catch up. But in the end, he still stopped where he was. He watched as the girl's figure disappeared in the dim light. She squeezed her eyes shut. His heart was beating wildly, unable to find a place to settle down. Her mind was in a mess. It was like a tangled mess. He was unable to sort out his thoughts. Yiqing Luo's words were like a curse, as it kept replaying in his mind. She was unable to refute any of Yiqing Luo's words. While he was in a trance, Baisu did not notice that a wisp of black aura was slowly approaching her. In an instant, it fused with her soul consciousness. Baisu only felt that the suffocation in her heart was even more intense. It was as if something was oppressing her emotions. Baisu, suddenly, a voice rang out from behind her. A man's magnificent figure appeared in front of her. Only then did Baisu come to her senses. She raised her head in a daze and met the man's obsidian eyes. She couldn't help but shiver. Dizun, where's little Luo? DMO Xian's brows creased tightly as he surveyed the surroundings. In the air, there was the scent of Lil Luo air. There was also the residual power of her Xian wave. Baisu was about to say something. Suddenly, a voice rang out in his mind. She's dead. She died in front of us. Yes, I can save her, but why should I? You know very well that I want her dead. You know very well that I want her dead. You know very well that I want her dead. The girl's extremely cold voice made Baisu's soul sense tremble uncontrollably. DMO Xian furrowed his brows and handed over the jade pendant he used to nurture his spirit consciousness. Baisu, what's wrong? I'm fine. Baisu snapped out of her trance and took the jade pendant. Following that, his eyelids drooped slightly as his voice drifted and couldn't be heard clearly. I rushed over to chase after Bai Mei. I didn't see Yi Qing Luo. DMO, Xian's expression congealed as he scanned the surroundings suspiciously. He seemed to be confirming something, until his eyes were about to look in the direction of the table. Baisu suddenly said anxiously, "Yes, just now I saw the palace master of the Palace of Darkness. He was outside, and I followed him to this ancestral hall, but when I arrived, he was gone." Palace master of the Netherworld Palace? DMO Xian's brows creased even more tightly. Everyone could see that. That palace master on the surface had feelings for Yi Qing Luo. "Let's look around. You've set up an enchantment here, so they must still be in the Gu residence," Baisu suggested. DMO Xian took a look at Baisu. In the end, he followed Baisu out of the ancestral hall. "I'm still writing. Don't mess with my babies. Let's read it tomorrow morning." Mwah. End of this chapter. Chapter 4485. After leaving, DMO Xian couldn't help but turn his head back and swept a glance at the ancestral hall. He somehow felt that there was Lil Luo's presence here. Could it be an illusion? But when he turned back, DMO Xian didn't discover it. When he walked out of the ancestral hall, his spirit consciousness lowered its head slightly. A wisp of extremely faint black energy was slowly dispersing in his eyes. On the other side, under the flickering light, Yi Qing Luo closed her eyes from the piercing. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the ancestral hall. The bustling noises beside her made her dig her ears uncontrollably. What entered her eyes was an extremely bustling street. The surroundings were filled with hawkers and commoners. People came and went, flourishing and prosperous. What place was this? Yi Qing Luo blinked her eyes as she looked around in a daze. Why? Did she feel that this place was a little familiar? It seemed like she had seen it somewhere before, but it seemed different. Coincidentally, a commoner walked past her. Yi Qing Luo pulled him back. "May I know where this place is?" That person looked at Yi Qing Luo strangely, but when his gaze met Yi Qing Luo's devastatingly beautiful face, his face flushed red. Miss, this is the West Continent's Three Spring City." Yi Qing Luo. "Miss, are you an outsider?" I am from Three Spring City. If Miss wants to know what is happening in Three Spring City, I can help you." That person looked at Yi Qing Luo in a daze. Yi Qing Luo swallowed a mouthful of saliva as she stared at that person and said word by word, "Say it again, where is this place?" "West Continent, Three Spring City." That person was shocked by Yi Qing Luo as he replied in a taut voice. This time, Yi Qing Luo was completely dumbfounded. No wonder she felt that this place was familiar. Wasn't this the West Continent's Three Springs City? But this place was very different from the Three Springs City in her memory. Many of the houses and buildings were different from the geographical location in her memory. Could it be that it changed after she left Three Springs City? That's not right. If this was really Three Springs City, how is it possible that no one recognized her? No matter what, she had caused quite a lot of trouble in Three Springs City. How strange. The thing that the Palace of Gloomy Darkness had spent so much effort to find in the ancestral hall was a teleportation formation. A teleportation array that could send people back to the West Continent? Did Gloomy Palace have to go through so much trouble just for a teleportation formation? No, that's not right. Why would the teleportation formation of the Shi-Lan continent be in the ancestral hall of the Gu residence? Things are definitely not that simple. Yi Qing Luo felt that her brain wasn't enough as she pulled that person and asked, "Where's the location of Three Springs Sect now?" Since he was back in Three Springs City, he would go home to take a look. It had been a long time since she last saw Yi Fengyu and the others. Hearing Yi Qing Luo's question, that person was stunned. What Three Springs Sect? In Three Springs City, there's no place called Three Springs Sect. No. When Yi Qing Luo heard that, she was instantly stunned. She thanked that person and pulled a few more people over to ask the same question. None of them had any impression of the Three Springs sect. Yiqing Luo realized that something was amiss. She hurriedly walked in the direction of the Three Springs sect, according to her memories. However, when he reached his destination, in front of him was not the Three Springs sect's mansion, as he remembered, but a barren mountain. The surroundings weren't the bustling streets in her memories, but an endless barren land. Chapter 4486. This time, Yiqing Luo was completely dumbfounded. Everything in front of her was both familiar and strange. What on earth was this situation? Just at this moment, Yiqing Luo acutely heard some sound, and it was rapidly approaching this side. In the air, there was a piercingly cold chill. Yiqing Luo subconsciously moved her body and hid herself in the lush trees. Very quickly, she saw two figures as swift as lightning flying over. One person, dressed in a blazing red robe, stepped lightly on a branch, facing the wind. A red veil covered her face, but it made her look like a fairy descending to earth, independent of the world. And floating in midair, facing the red-robed woman, was a man in a green robe. That man had a handsome face, but between his brows, there was a sinister air. Fengge, you really want to be with him? The woman's brows were exquisite, a pair of bewitching fox-like eyes, slightly raised, revealing some sweetness. Yes. Agu, I love him. The man's body trembled slightly as his tone became tense. Love him? Do you know who he is? He doesn't love you at all. Agu. The woman seemed to be annoyed as her tone became more forceful. I am willing to share this matter with you. That is because I treat you as my friend. If you are unable to accept the feelings between him and me, then, in future, we will not meet again. Fengge, for a man who you have known for less than 3 months, you're going to give up our thousands of years of feelings? The man suddenly laughed lowly. His handsome face was filled with pain. The woman realized that her words had hurt the man and wanted to open her mouth to explain, but when the words came to her mouth, she didn't know how to explain. In the end, she could only sigh, Agu, I only hope to be able to get your blessing. It is impossible for me to bless you with other men. The man suddenly raised his head as his eyes stared fixedly at the woman. I don't believe that you don't know my feelings for you. The woman's eyes seeped out a trace of helplessness and guilt. She sighed softly, raised her hand, and placed it on her belly. Agu, I've always regarded you as my best friend. I've told you long ago that it's impossible between us. I already have his flesh and blood here. These words were like a clap of thunder that struck the man's mind. His eyes stared at the woman's stomach in disbelief. He was unable to regain his senses for a long time. The woman lowered her eyes and looked at her stomach. Her eyes were filled with sweetness and gentleness. Agu, I want to get married before our child is born. The man was dumbstruck and did not reply. The woman continued, the wedding will be held in Three Spring City, because he said that's where we met. Does he know who you are? It took the man a while to find his voice. At the mention of this, the woman's mood became slightly downcast. She slowly shook her head and said, he doesn't know, so this also proves that he isn't with me because of my identity. I will find a time to tell him about this. Ha! The man slowly closed his eyes, his body landing on the ground. He turned around, his handsome face filled with pain and forbearance. You are really cruel, from cruelly rejecting me, to cruelly using such a method to force me to give up on you. Agu. The woman sighed. Matters of the heart can't be forced. From a long time ago, I told you, I like you, but this has nothing to do with love. This book came from Chapter 4487. Yes, it's me. I'm too stubborn. The man gave a low laugh. Since this is your choice, I will respect it, but your wedding I will not attend. Agu. The lady wanted to say something, but she was interrupted by the man. Fengge, don't be so cruel to me. The lady choked for a moment. The man turned around and left without hesitation. The wind brought the man's slightly cold words, If you wish for your wedding to proceed smoothly, don't expect me to appear." After the man left, the lady stood at the same spot for a while, staring at the direction where the man left for a long time. After some time, she sighed faintly. She raised her hand and caressed her tummy. Her red lips curled, and her tone was filled with gentleness. "Your godfather, Agu, will definitely meet the woman who belongs to him. One day, he will understand my feelings today, the feelings of having you." She could tell. The lady truly loved that man, and she truly doted on the child in her tummy. After that, the lady also left. Yiqing Luo was still hiding in the lush branches for a while before she slowly came out. That lady dressed in a fiery red dress earlier. She looked a little familiar. She didn't know if it was an illusion. She felt as though she had seen her somewhere before. As for the other man, not to mention that face, she absolutely couldn't remember wrongly. Bloodbone Barbaric King. That man's face was exactly the same as the head she saw on the Bloodbone Barbaric King's bones. The only difference was that the head's face was much older. One was around 40 years old. One was around 20 years old. This man with the Bloodbone Barbaric King's face looked at most in his early 20s. Nirvana Realm, West Continent, Three Springs City, Bloodbone Barbaric King. Yiqing Luo's mind strung together all these matters. Suddenly, an exaggerated thought surfaced in her mind. This place, could it be Bloodbone Barbaric King's memory? She entered this space from the Bloodbone Barbaric King's ancestral hall. That faint light was actually not some transportation array, but the entrance to the Bloodbone Barbaric King's memory. Where she was now, it was all Bloodbone Barbaric King's memory. So, the real purpose of the Abyss Palace was to look for the Barbaric Bloodbone King's memory? Why was that? Forget it. Even if she racked her brains, she might not be able to understand. He could only continue to see if there was anything in the memories of the Bloodbone Barbaric King that would interest the Palace of Darkness. At this moment, Yiqing Luo only felt a deafening roar coming from the sky. The entire earth began to shake violently. Everything in front of him began to change dramatically. Soon, it was completely covered by darkness. She didn't have time to react. Light returned to his eyes. The scene changed once again. At this moment, she was standing on a blood-stained land. Corpses were strewn all over the ground, and the stench of blood filled her nose. This was a battlefield. Moreover, it was a vast battlefield. As far as the eye could see, it was a reign of terror. Even the air seemed to be dyed red. This kind of scene change made Yiqing Luo almost certain where she was. This was definitely not a normal space. Her gaze searched everywhere, trying to find the traces of the Bloodbone Barbaric King. As long as she found the Bloodbone Barbaric King, she would be able to find out what the plot of this scene was. This book came from Chapter 4488. She had just moved her feet. Her hand was suddenly grabbed by someone. A dignified voice sounded from behind. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Then, the man pulled her over forcefully. Yiqing Luo turned her head back and saw a group of soldiers dressed in battle armor, filled with blood qi. The person who grabbed her arm should be a general. Yiqing Luo was stunned. Where did they pop out from? Why didn't she sense their approach? Bring her down for investigation. That general saw Yiqing Luo keeping quiet and impatiently threw her towards the group of soldiers behind him. A straight man, totally without any protective feelings for the fairer sex. The soldiers supported Yiqing Luo and escorted her to the other side of the battlefield. Yiqing Luo hurriedly cried out, "Wait, wait." She looked at that general. Where is this place? General Wei's solemn face revealed a suspicious expression. His gaze was as sharp as a torch as he stared deeply at Yiqing Luo. "Young lady, there's no use in pretending to be crazy. Accept the investigation obediently." Yiqing Luo. She really didn't know where this place was. The soldiers were about to drag her away again. Yiqing Luo could only ask directly, "Do you know the Bloodbone Barbaric King? Where is he?" "Bloodbone Barbaric King?" The general murmured these four words softly as he raised his brows slightly. You're talking about that bone lord who refines blood bones and uses them to swallow the god's body. Right. It's Bone Lord. Yi Qing Luo's eyes lit up. So, the name Bone Lord wasn't given by him in the heaven realm, but his real name was Bone Lord. The general's expression turned extremely gloomy as his gaze sharpened. What's your relationship with Bone Lord? Yi Qing Luo. The atmosphere seemed a little wrong. The general's expression was obviously not right. She mentioned the Bloodbone barbaric king, which made them even more suspicious of her. But this also meant that these people were indeed related to the Bloodbone barbaric king. This space was indeed the Bloodbone barbaric king's memory. Just as Yi Qing Luo was racking her brains to think of how to answer this question, suddenly, the smoke of battle and a terrifying profound light soared into the sky. That burst of powerful pressure shook Yi Qing Luo's heart tightly, as though it was being squeezed by something fiercely. Oh no! Bone Lord is starting to defy the heavens again. Go! Stop, Bone Lord! General's expression sunk as he looked deeply at Yi Qing Luo. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's pained expression due to the surrounding profound rays, his frown deepened as he threw the man to one of the soldiers. Then, he quickly led the rest of the soldiers towards the direction where the black rays had come from. The soldiers who were left behind held onto Yi Qing Luo as they brought her towards the direction of the camp. On the way, Yi Qing Luo started to worm information from the soldiers. The general was very shrewd. He could not be tricked. But with just a few sentences from the soldier, Yi Qing Luo managed to get the information out of him. As it turned out, she was currently at the border of the God realm and the heaven realm. This was a war in the God world. The reason was Bone Lord used his divine body as nourishment to extend his life and increase his strength. Using other God realms people's flesh and blood to strengthen his own actions had violated the balance of Heaven Way. Hence, the Emperor of the God Emperor sent his army to suppress it. These soldiers were all sent by the Emperor of the God Emperor to stop Bone Lord's evil deeds. Listening to the soldiers' words, Yi Qing Luo inexplicably felt that the plot was somewhat familiar. Hurry up and read the latest update. Download address. Phone reading. Chapter 4489. Wait a minute. She remembered that when Xian first met the Bloodbone barbaric king, he had mentioned this incident. The Bloodbone barbaric king had privately used the god's body as nourishment, causing chaos in the god realm. After that, the Emperor of God sent his army to suppress it, but they all became nourishment for the Bloodbone barbaric king and were completely annihilated. The incident that Xian had mentioned at that time. Was it this incident now? These soldiers were about to be completely annihilated. After that, the Emperor of God personally joined the battle and annihilated the Bloodbone barbaric king. How did she end up in the Bloodbone barbaric king's memory? Outside the camp, the majestic and terrifying profound wave was about to destroy the heavens and earth. The battle situation was getting more and more urgent. The soldiers could tell that Yi Qing Luo was a weak cultivator. On top of that, she had a beautiful face that could topple cities. She was born with an advantage. The soldiers couldn't bear to tie her up. They only reminded her to stay in the camp and not to run around, then closed the door and rushed to the battlefield. Yi Qing Luo naturally wouldn't be so obedient. After the soldiers left, she operated the Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade to protect her heart meridians and then quietly left the camp. She was now in the Bloodbone barbaric king's memory. The first thing to do was to find the Bloodbone barbaric king, to know the real core of this memory. The camp's back door was slightly further away from the battlefield. The remaining power of the profound wave didn't come over. Yi Qing Luo didn't feel too much pressure squeezing her heart. This battle was indeed extremely tragic. Where Yi Qing Luo walked past, corpses were strewn all over the place. She was expressionless, totally unaffected by these bloody scenes. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, suddenly, the ground trembled and countless fissures appeared. Hard bones protruded out from the cracks. The moment Yi Qing Luo saw those bones, her body instinctively leaped up and borrowed the force to fly into the sky. Following that, she hurriedly summoned Chi-Chi. Luckily, although this was the Bloodbone Barbaric King's memory space, but it didn't restrict her power. She immediately flipped over and sat on Chi-Chi's back. Chi-Chi hovered in midair. Yi Qing Luo lowered her head to look below. Bone after bone emerged from the ground. They were so densely packed that they looked like a spiderweb. Wherever it went, it sucked the broken limbs and bones on the ground into its bones. The bones were like starving beasts, devouring the corpses on the ground in large mouthfuls. And, along with the bone devouring, the bloody bones gradually turned red. The joints were still stained with drops of blood. It was the bloodbone of the Bloodbone Barbarian King. The barbaric Bloodbone King absorbed all the corpses on the battlefield. The bloodbones began to shrink back. Yi Qing Luo rubbed Chi-Chi's big head and motioned it to follow. Soon, Chi-Chi followed the retreating bloodbones and arrived outside a huge cave. The bloodbones shrank back into the cave. Yi Qing Luo leaped down from Chi-Chi's body, and Chi-Chi turned into a palm-sized kitten and stood on Yi Qing Luo's shoulder. A man and a beast quietly entered the cave. It was pitch black inside the cave. Yi Qing Luo's night vision was not bad. She could barely see the things around her in the cave. In addition, there was the rustling sound of the bloody bones retracting and rubbing against the ground. Yi Qing Luo also followed up. She didn't know how long they had walked. Yi Qing Luo estimated that they should have reached the deepest part of the cave. That sound of the bloody bones rubbing against the ground stopped. Yi Qing Luo immediately held her breath and concealed all her presence as she quietly moved forward. Chapter 4490. Indistinctly, she could hear a deep groan coming from the front, as though it was enduring a huge pain. In a quiet and spacious cave, an extremely soft echo was heard. Yi Qing Luo's approach didn't attract the attention of the people inside. She was nearing the direction of the sound. The nearer she got, the more Yi Qing Luo could feel the dense, evil qi in the air, until the front was no longer a winding passageway, but a spacious cave. The densely packed, bloody bones were attached to the steep stone walls like a spiderweb. Yi Qing Luo didn't get any nearer. She had crossed hands with the Bloodbone Barbaric King previously, so she was very clear. Once she touched the blood bones, she would be discovered by the Bloodbone Barbaric King. She sized up the densely packed blood bones in front of her, searching for the Bloodbone Barbaric King's head. The muffled groans of pain continued to ring out. Yi Qing Luo followed the sound. Very quickly, she saw the Bloodbone Barbaric King's head in the densely packed bloodbone web. The Bloodbone Barbaric King still looked so young. His handsome face was constantly contorted as he suffered great pain. The air was filled with the stench of blood. Yi Qing Luo discovered the blood bones which had appeared on the battlefield and absorbed the corpses on the battlefield were making a cracking sound as they merged with the blood bones in the cave. Each of the blood bones were stained with sticky blood or flesh, intertwining and merging with each other. The entire space was filled with the cracking sound of bones colliding or breaking, which was extremely horrifying. And following this sound, the Bloodbone Barbaric King's groan and pain became even more intense. Nobody knew how much time had passed. Only then did that painful groan slowly stop. The Bloodbone Barbaric King's heavy panting sound was extremely clear. Sweat dripped down from his forehead. Bone 1. The Bloodbone Barbaric King panted heavily. Very quickly, a figure appeared out of thin air among the densely packed blood bones. "How is it?" Bloodbone Barbaric King asked. Bone 1 cupped his fists. "It's done. Everything's fine now." The Bloodbone Barbaric King heaved a sigh of relief as he slowly closed his eyes. His mood also relaxed a lot. He pursed his lips tightly. His cold face was full of confusion. "Bone Lord, I have something to say." The Barbaric Bloodbone King did not open his eyes. "I know what you want to say. There's no need to say more. I really don't understand why the Bone Lord had to use such a method." Bone 1 said stubbornly. The Bone Lord clearly knows that she won't be grateful to you, and she doesn't know how much pain you've suffered because of her. You've placed yourself in opposition to her. Shut up. The barbaric Bloodbone King suddenly opened his eyes, which were filled with rage. Gui knelt down abruptly. This subordinate was just feeling injustice for Bone Lord. Everything Bone Lord did was for her, but she wanted to kill you. The Bloodbone Barbarian King's eyes were filled with coldness. Gui knelt there fearlessly. I really don't understand. The person who caused this situation is her. But now, you have to commit murder for the sake of the evil creature she created. Bang! Before Gui could finish his words, he was thrown out by a piece of Bloodbone. Yiqing Luo hurriedly turned sideways and shrunk into the darkness. Very quickly, a petite figure scuttled out from the darkness. The lady helped Gui up and said in a trembling voice, "Bone Lord, please calm down. I'll bring Gui down now." End of this chapter. The thick stench of blood and the surrounding Xian ripples were like monstrous waves, constantly surging. Yiqing Luo glanced around. He looked at his hands and feet again. Did this change the scene again? Was it just an illusion that the barbaric Bloodbone King had discovered her existence? Yiqing Luo's complexion turned slightly pale. Feng Gu, are we really going to end up like this? A voice came from not far away. It was the barbaric Bloodbone King. When Yiqing Luo heard his voice, she recalled the feeling of being entangled to her ankles by the Bloodbone in the cave earlier. She shuddered, listening to the direction of the voice. The distance between her and the barbaric Bloodbone King wasn't too far. Cautiously, she moved her feet towards the direction of the sound. Update complete moi. End of this chapter, the fastest update speed. Hurry up and read it. Download address. Mobile phone reading. Chapter 4492. Indeed, after a few steps, just at the edge of the cliff, she saw two figures suspended in midair. Feng Gu and Bloodbone Barbaric King. The surrounding profound waves surged like a surging, huge wave. The sky was covered by an inky black, profound energy, causing the surrounding atmosphere to become extremely oppressive. The atmosphere between the two was no longer as gentle as the first time Yiqing Luo saw it, but it was encircled by a layer of thick, austere aura. When the two of them looked at each other, there was an eerie chill. Agu, you're my most important friend. The lady's voice was filled with pain. Her fingers, which were holding onto the long sword, turned white. Why? Why do we have to come to such a stage? I'm out on something today. I'll come back to write the script. I'll take a day off first, adding on to the 3 chapters 1.0 previously and the 3 chapters 1.0 today, plus the 1 chapter 1.0, I owe a total of 8 chapters. I'll make up for it in 2 days' time, moi. They were above thousands of people. What kind of woman couldn't he get? Why should he pity this broken shoe? The scene was in chaos. Huangfu Zhangdong looked at the distance between him and Bai Mei as he stared furiously at Huangfu Sheng. Immediately after, he called for the Huangfu family's forces as they speedily pounced towards Bai Mei's direction. That impatient action made Huangfu Sheng's lips twitch in disdain. Ah Sheng. Gu Zishi stretched out her arms as she hugged his waist, as she raised her head, as she gazed deeply at Huangfu Sheng's face. Her lips curled upwards as her smile was warm and gentle. I'll always be here. Huangfu Sheng's cold and stiff expression slowly softened. He gently caressed Gu Zishi's hair as their eyes met. The cold air, which was emitting from his body, also gradually stopped. This scene fell into the eyes of the crowd not far away. Yiqing Luo's lips curled as she looked behind her with a smile which didn't look like a smile. Your little cousin has a good life. To meet a good lady, you don't need to worry. Who's worried about him? Xiao Jin snorted coldly. Yiqing Luo's gaze slid downwards as she looked at Yin Xiao Yi, who was standing beside Xiao Jin. Her gaze fell onto their interlocked fingers. Her lips curled into a gorgeous smile. You're also lucky to meet a good lady. They were talking and laughing. His gaze fell on their intertwined fingers. The corners of her lips curled up into a gorgeous smile. You're lucky to have met a good girl. They were talking and laughing. Yiqing Luo suddenly felt that the man beside her had some changes in his emotions. She glanced sideways at Dmo Xian. What's wrong? The man's expression was cold, and there was a hint of anger in his eyes. The girl turned to look at him. The look in his eyes had become gentle and unique to her. What's the matter? Yiqing Luo raised her hand and touched his face as she repeated that sentence. Dmo Xian lifted his hand. His purple robe fluttered like flowing clouds, and a wisp of white shadow could be vaguely seen swaying. Before Yiqing Luo had the chance to ask, Dmo Xian's expression revealed some unkind intentions. Pursing his thin lips, he bent down slowly and kissed her lips. Then, he headed in the direction of the chaotic crowd. That was the direction of Bai Mei from the Palace of Darkness. There weren't many people from the Palace of Darkness who came this time around. The surrounding large powerhouses had long gone crazy over the so-called secret of the Divine Emperor's tomb. How could the Palace of Darkness's disciples stop them? It could be said that Bai Mei had been abused so badly that it was unbearable to watch. She was almost on her last breath, and on her body, there was nothing related to the Divine Emperor's tomb. Chapter 4493. Feng Ge, since you've already chosen to capture me, then we're already enemies. The blood-bone barbarian monarch smiled evilly. He raised his hand and caressed his lips as if he wanted to continue. Feng Ge gripped her long sword tightly. Her pair of enchanting eyes overflowed with coldness. But because of the person in front of her, she forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart. As long as you give me a reasonable explanation, I will take responsibility for this matter. Feng Ji's voice was almost squeezed out from between her teeth. This was obviously her last concession. The blood-bone barbarian monarch's evil smile stiffened. His pitch-black eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Fleeting, he laughed. His laughter was loud, but it seemed to be concealing some kind of emotion in his heart. Take responsibility for me? Tell me. You were the one who killed those people? Or are you going to become the mastermind behind me? The blood-bone barbarian monarch laughed in a low voice. His laughter was full of mockery. Don't joke around. Who are you and who am I? Are you going to destroy your own future for me? He laughed and shook his head mockingly. No, impossible. The person you love is not me. You still have your child. How are you going to take responsibility for me? Under the man's mocking tone, the woman was actually unable to refute his words. She clenched her fists. You really don't want to tell me the real reason? How can I tell you without a reason? The blood-bone barbarian monarch snorted. Or do you want me to lie to you? The woman's delicate body suddenly tensed up. You mean the rumors outside are all true? Is it really because you want to obtain eternal life and increase your own strength that you've cultivated a forbidden art, used divine bodies as nourishment, and refined the flesh and blood of other profound practitioners from the God realm into your own power? Every word she said, her tone became tenser. In the end, her entire mood was tense. The blood-bone barbarian monarch smiled. His expression was very indifferent. It's true. Goo. The woman screamed hysterically, tears seeping out from the corners of her eyes. You promised me that when I succeeded the throne, I would make you the barbaric blood-bone king, and that you would accompany me to protect everything. She was really hurt. Moreover, he was thoroughly injured. She had never doubted Agu, even if everyone was condemning Agu. But she firmly believed that everything Agu had done, he definitely had his own difficulties. However, Agu had personally shattered all of her beliefs. This was her brother, who was as close as a brother to her. He was someone she had given her true feelings to and treated as her own brother. But he admitted all of this with his own mouth. The barbaric blood-bone king's eyes changed when he saw her tears. But Feng Ge, right now I am also invincible barbaric blood-bone king. The barbaric blood-bone king chuckled. However, The woman's appearance in the past appeared before his eyes. She smiled brightly and looked at him. From now on, your title will be Barbaric Bloodbone King. Isn't it awesome? The scene of the past still seemed like it was yesterday. The barbaric Bloodbone King closed his eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and calmed his emotions. Then, he maintained his evil smile and said word by word, "If you want to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, I'm afraid you can't do it now." His gaze fell on the long sword in her hand. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, and there was a bit of coldness in his eyes. Chapter 4494. The chapter name is wrong, but the content is correct. The past memory. Wait till the day when you can really lay your hands on me. Then come and find me. Saying that, he turned around. The densely packed blood and bones quickly gathered and wrapped him up in layers. The crisp sound of bones echoed throughout the entire space. Following that, the figure of the barbaric Bloodbone King disappeared among the blood bones. The sky full of blood bones also merged into the air. The lady stood on the spot, staring blankly at the direction where the barbaric Bloodbone King disappeared. Her body seemed to have lost all support as it suddenly fell to the ground. The sharp crystal-long sword also fell to the ground. She shut her eyes tightly. The expression on her face was an uncontrollable restlessness. Why did it become like this? Agu, why did he do that? I really don't want to get into this situation with him. The lady's murmur was very soft, but Yiqing Luo, who was lying on the cliff, heard it clearly. Looking at the scene in front of her, Yiqing Luo roughly understood this memory. It was no wonder that the people in the Gu residence were not allowed to mention the words Barbaric Bloodbone King. It turned out that Barbaric Bloodbone King was the title given to him by this lady named Feng Gu. In the end, the two of them became enemies. And because of this, Barbaric Bloodbone King did not want to mention these words again. She had to admit, there was actually a so-called friendship between men and women. At least for Feng Gu. She indeed sincerely treated the Barbaric Bloodbone King as her own friend and even a relative. Otherwise, she would not be in so much pain because of the Barbaric Bloodbone King's actions. In the previous memory, Yiqing Luo remembered that the barbaric Bloodbone King absorbed the nourishment from the god's body. It seemed to be for Feng Gu. What the F***CK? Could it be a sadomasochistic relationship? He did it for her. She was totally unaware and had all sorts of misunderstandings. Then both of them went their separate ways. So sadistic. Yiqing Luo broke out in cold sweat for the both of them. He wondered if Feng Gu would regret her decision to choose the man she loved deeply after she found out about this. Yiqing Luo was thinking. Suddenly a figure appeared from not too far away. That person was tall and muscular. Not knowing if it was because they were too far apart, the light from this angle pierced her eyes. Yiqing Luo couldn't see that person's face clearly. The man approached Feng Gu. Yiqing Luo couldn't even see that person's face clearly. "All right, don't be sad." It was a man's voice. It was gentle and extremely pleasant to listen to. "You are so sad. My heart aches." Huang. When the woman heard the man's voice, she threw herself into his arms. Yiqing Luo was puzzled. She could clearly see the woman's face, but he couldn't see the man's face clearly. However, judging from the woman's actions and tone, it was obvious that she wasn't lying. That man should be the person she had chosen to love deeply. This is his own choice. He can't blame anyone else. The man comforted her gently. "Don't let your imagination run wild. You're still pregnant." Feng Gu wrapped her arms around his waist tightly, as if she had found a safe place to rest. She closed her eyes in peace. "To me, he's like an older brother. I don't want him to go astray because of me. Otherwise, I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life." "I know." The man lowered his head and kissed her hair. "He will understand your painstaking efforts. As long as he doesn't use the forbidden technique, the sovereign of God Emperor will not do anything to him." Huang. Feng Gu suddenly raised her head and looked at the man. "Actually, the sovereign of God Emperor," following Feng Ji's gaze upwards. Yiqing Luo was also trying her best to see the man's face clearly. Chapter 4495. The chapter name is wrong, but the content is correct. Past memory at this moment. That familiar earth quaking and mountain shaking, as well as the distortion of space, struck her once again. Yiqing Luo. Mother asterisk her. What a coincidence. Every critical moment, it would shift to the next space. Was it intentional? Was it because he didn't want her to discover the most important part of this memory? It was simply poisonous. No matter how Yiqing Luo ridiculed in her heart, this distorted space once again made her lose her gravity, causing her to blink out. When she opened her eyes again, as expected, the scene had shifted again. Yiqing Luo expressed that she was used to it and remained calm. She looked around in a daze. Now, she was in an extremely secluded mountain peak. In front of her was a stretch of luxuriant foliage, thick and extremely horrifying plants. And not far ahead, there was a huge cave. Yiqing Luo walked over, but she didn't go near, because the surroundings of the cave were rippling with dense, profound waves. One circle after another, like ripples spreading out. If she went near, she would suffer from this wave of energy attack. Yiqing Luo took a look and casually found a big tree. She chose a place that could withstand her weight and could easily conceal her figure. She had already figured out the routine, anyway, to the memory of this space. Even if she didn't move, what was supposed to happen would definitely happen. All she had to do was wait here. As expected, about 2 hours later, a rustling sound was heard from the dense forest. Yiqing Luo shifted her body and looked towards the direction of the sound. She saw a lady dressed in a fiery red robe, rushing towards the cave. The profound waves agitated her red dress, and the veil on her face was also blown lightly. His aura was extremely cold and solemn, as though it was going to destroy the heaven and earth. When a lady rushed to the cave, she raised a long sword in her hand and waved it towards the cave. The profound waves surged, shaking the space. Some of the surrounding plants were uprooted by the profound waves. The place where Yiqing Luo was hiding was almost overturned. But at this timely moment, Kacha, a bloody bone slid out of the cave. Then countless bloody bones crawled out of the cave. When he realized that it was a woman, he felt a chill run down his spine. The blood bone shrank back abruptly. After a while, the blood-bone barbarian king walked out of the cave. Yiqing Luo, who was in the dark, it seemed like the barbaric blood-bone king knew that his current form was extremely ugly. He didn't want to meet Feng Ge in an ugly appearance. Yiqing Luo's vision swept past Feng Ge. He did not know what the timeline of these memories was like. Feng Ji's stomach had already flattened. This meant that the child in her stomach had already been born. Moreover, she had finished her confinement. How long had it been since the 3 memory segments had happened? Yiqing Luo was really dumbfounded looking at this. Feng Ge, the blood-bone barbaric king, looked at the woman's face greedily, his eyes filled with longing. Ew. Why are you here? How long do you want to hide? The woman opened her mouth. Her voice was extremely cold. The blood-bone barbaric king lowered his eyes slightly as he sighed softly. I have no choice. You guys are chasing too closely. If I don't hide, then I can only absorb all of them to become my nourishment. If I do this, you will not be happy. The woman raised a long sword in her hand as she gave a cold laugh. Yes, I'm very unhappy, so I'm here on behalf of heaven. Chapter 4496. The blood-bone barbarian king was startled and looked at him in a daze. Suddenly, he grinned and said, Is Feng Ge ready to kill me? The woman's eyes were cold. She did not respond. With a leap, he swept away the boundless profound light and swung his sword. She attacked without holding back. The killing intent in the profound light was not fake. The barbaric bloodbone king was stunned by her murderous aura. His smiling face finally couldn't help but freeze. He frowned slightly, and a puzzled expression floated in his eyes. Perhaps it was because he was stunned that he didn't dodge. Or was it because he didn't believe that Fongu would kill him? The barbaric Bloodbone King did not dodge. He did not retaliate either. The long sword pierced straight through the Bloodbone Barbarian King's body, from one end of his shoulder to the other end of his body. The sharp pain made the barbaric Bloodbone King's face turn deathly pale. He looked at Fongu in disbelief. His eyes were filled with panic and helplessness. "Do you really think I can't bear to kill you?" The woman's cold words were filled with coldness. "Do you know that I've wanted to kill you since the moment a Huang appeared in my life?" The Bloodbone Barbarian King was startled. The icy chill made him unable to think properly. The woman laughed mockingly. "If a Huang hadn't told me that you were still useful, I would have killed you long ago. Don't you know that your self-righteous feelings for me not only annoys me, but also disgusts me?" The last 3 words. The woman deliberately looked at the barbaric Bloodbone King's eyes and said word by word. Those 3 words. It was like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in the barbaric Bloodbone King's mind. The piercing pain in his shoulder. It was not even half as big as his heart. Looking at the astonished and incredulous expression on the man's face, the mocking look on the woman's face became even more pronounced. As if she was ridiculing the man's ignorance, she sneered, "Agu, everyone says that you're a smart person, but in my eyes, you're as stupid as a pig." The woman laughed. Suddenly, she moved her fingers. He pulled the sword out of the barbaric Bloodbone King's shoulder. Blood splattered everywhere. The barbaric Bloodbone King's body was also sent flying by the force of the sword. His body fell heavily to the ground. He groaned in pain. The sharp pain in his shoulder and the feeling of blood loss caused his mind to finally clear up. The woman raised her sword again and swung it at the barbaric Bloodbone King. This time, the barbaric Bloodbone King reacted. He quickly rolled on the ground and dodged the woman's attack. His face was gloomy. The bone-chilling coldness was eroding his body and mind. Even though he saw the woman's extremely cold face with his own eyes, he still could not believe it. "Fongu, what are you talking about?" The woman raised her voice and laughed loudly. Then she suddenly flew over. The sword in his hand had no intention of holding back at all. The piercingly cold sword wave swept up a dense, killing intent. The barbaric Bloodbone King naturally felt the murderous aura from the woman. He dodged awkwardly. However, one of them was ruthless and determined to kill him. One of them was filled with shock, yet he was unwilling to retaliate. There was no suspense at all in this war. In just a short while, the Bloodbone Barbarian King was once again struck by the sword and was pressed against the steep rock wall by the woman. The woman forcefully stepped on him to the ground. Pointing the sword at the barbaric Bloodbone King, she said, "You're useless now. You can die." Fongu. There was no fear of death in the barbaric Bloodbone King's eyes, but despair and pain towards the woman's coldness. Hurry up and read the latest update. Download URL. Chapter 4497. I'll tell you the truth. Actually, from the very beginning, I knew everything you did for me. Do you think that Huang approached me because of my identity? But Agu, I love him. If he really wants my life, I'm willing to give it to him. The pupils of the barbaric Bloodbone King contracted. The woman's words pierced his heart deeply. The woman looked at his pale face and smiled even more happily. Do you really think that I don't know that it's because of me that you're bearing the infamy of the world? No, actually I know everything. I know everything. Because of my identity, the child in my womb is born with an imperial mandate. It will inherit everything I have, and even my identity. So, someone is secretly trying to take my life and my child's life while I'm pregnant and my power is unstable. In order to protect me, to protect my child, you cultivated a forbidden technique. Yes, everything the Bloodbone Barbarian King had done was for Fongu, for the child in Fengji's belly. Even though he knew that Fongu didn't love him and that the child in Fengji's belly was another man's child. but he still disregarded everything, even sacrificing himself, just to protect Fengge, cultivating a forbidden technique, using other divine bodies as nourishment. He had become a street rat, and everyone wanted to beat him up. Furthermore, even she had to come forward to suppress him. He had to bear her misunderstanding, her confusion, and her disappointment. But she knew everything that had happened. She knew everything, but he accepted it as a matter of course. He even pretended not to know anything. Looking at him, he was like a clown, sacrificing everything for her. "I'm very grateful to you, really." The woman smiled at him. However, his eyes were filled with coldness. "Now that my child has been born, your final role now is to fulfill my reputation and die by my hand." She leaned down slightly. The foot that was stepping on the barbaric Bloodbone King's chest increased in strength. "Don't you love me very much? Now, everyone in the world is questioning whether the Divine Emperor's faction is unable to kill you because of our relationship. I protected you. If I kill you now, I'll definitely be able to clear my name. For me, so die." The barbaric Bloodbone King's face darkened. He could tell that the woman's words came from the bottom of her heart. He curled his lips into a sneer, and his eyes were filled with surging waves. Just as the woman's sword was about to descend, he made a move. He grabbed the woman's ankle. "Kacha!" The woman's bare leg was broken. The woman cried out in pain. The barbaric Bloodbone King seized the opportunity to flip over and roll down the cliff on the other side of the cave. The woman limped as she chased after him. He looked down at the bottomless abyss. The gravel rolled around his feet, but he couldn't even hear the sound of the gravel hitting the ground. The woman stared at the bottom of the cliff for a long time. She sheathed her sword and snorted coldly. "Heh, you sure know how to choose. You know that death won't be that painful." After saying that, the woman left the scene, until the woman's figure and aura completely disappeared. Yiqing Luo then emerged from the darkness. She frowned as she stared at the direction where the woman left for a long time, and couldn't help but frown. Why did she feel that something was wrong? Chapter 4498. That woman called Fengge. It shouldn't be like this. Even though she had only met Fengge twice, she could also conclude that Fengge was definitely not such a person. The Fengge that he had seen in the previous memory. She was 100% sure. Fengge genuinely regarded the barbaric Bloodbone King as his own brother, or even his family. The look in her eyes could not be faked. But this memory, Fengge's image had completely collapsed. She looked at the barbaric Bloodbone King with a cold and emotionless gaze. It was as if all the feelings in the past were fake. There was a voice in Yiqing Luo's heart that kept telling her, Fengge was definitely not such a person. All of this must be a misunderstanding. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and retracted her vision. She summoned Chi-Chi and hopped onto its back. He asked Chi-Chi to jump off the cliff with her to look for the Bloodbone Barbaric King. The cliff was extremely high, and falling down would basically result in one's body being smashed to pieces. There probably wouldn't even be any scraps of flesh left. However, the Bloodbone Barbarian King was definitely not dead. If she had died, she would not have met the Bloodbone Barbarian King and would not have been brought to the Heaven Realm by him. The Bloodbone Barbarian King must have activated the male protagonist's halo when he fell. Riding on Chi-Chi, he searched all over the place. Another wave came. The earth quaked, the mountains shook, and space distorted. Yiqing Luo, it was time to switch spaces and switch memories again. By the time the darkness in front of her dispersed, Yiqing Luo regained her clarity. Everything in front of him, nothing had changed. It was still below the cliff. She was still on Chi-Chi's back. Yiqing Luo. What was going on? What happened just now? Wasn't the memory going to change? Why was there still no change? Is the program faulty? Yiqing Luo had a dazed look on her face as she rode on Chi-Chi and continued to look around the cliff to see if there were any caves halfway up the mountain or places within the tree branches. After searching for at least 2 hours, Yiqing Luo still hadn't found any traces of the Bloodbone Barbaric King. Without a goal, there was no way to find it. After searching for such a long time, it was time for Chi-Chi to rest. Yiqing Luo found a place to land and kept Chi-Chi back into the pet space. Suddenly, he heard the sound of someone stepping on a withered branch. Yiqing Luo's eyes shone brightly as she speedily dodged to one side, staring intently at the direction where the sound came from. Based on experience, as long as someone appeared, they would definitely be able to bring her back to the main character of this memory. As expected, very quickly, a blazing figure appeared in front of Yiqing Luo. It was Fengge. Yiqing Luo was slightly stunned. Why was she here? Could it be? He also felt that the barbaric Blood King wasn't dead, so he purposely ran down the cliff to stab it a few more times? No, that's not right. The look in the woman's eyes was different from before. The woman's footsteps were very hurried, and there was even a hint of panic. He quickly scanned his surroundings. The worry and nervousness in his eyes could not be concealed. The woman stopped at the place where Yiqing Luo was standing earlier. Her puzzled gaze surveyed the surroundings. Just now, I was obviously here and heard the commotion. I thought it was Agu. Why is there no one here? The woman paused, then raised her voice and called out, Agu, where are you? Agu. But the quiet surroundings didn't give her any response at all. The woman sighed softly. Hope Agu is fine. Chapter 4499. Yiqing Luo, who was hiding in the dark, her body tensed up, prepared to execute her blink movement to escape. After all, she had already experienced Feng Ji's strength. With Feng Ji's strength, it was actually very easy for her to sense her presence. However, the woman clearly did not sense her presence. On this point, Yiqing Luo also felt a little strange. There were a few times when she peeped at him from the side. Neither the Bloodbone Barbarian King nor Fengge noticed her presence. Was it because her hidden skills were getting better and better? Looking at Fengge, who had already walked far away, Yiqing Luo decisively chose to follow behind Fengge. It was simply a routine. As long as he followed Fengge, he would definitely be able to find the Bloodbone Barbarian King. As expected, after following Fengge for less than an hour, Fengge found the Bloodbone Barbarian King in a cave on the mountainside. Yiqing Luo, damn it, she could say that she had gone through no less than 20 caves. Why didn't they find this cave? He followed Fengge into the cave. Yiqing Luo saw from afar that the Bloodbone Barbarian King was covered in blood lying on the ground and had already fallen into a deep coma. His body was drenched in blood. Yiqing Luo felt apprehensive. He was injured to this extent, but he was still alive. His life was really tough. When Fengge saw the Bloodbone Barbarian King, his face immediately turned pale. She quickly walked to the Bloodbone Barbarian King's side and whispered its name. But the barbaric Bloodbone King did not react at all. His body was also extremely cold. If it wasn't for the faint breathing sounds coming from his chest, he would have been dead. They would probably think that he was dead. Fengge forcibly fed the Bloodbone Barbarian King a lot of elixirs from his interspatial ring. She also infused her dark force into his body. After tossing and turning for a long time, the Bloodbone Barbarian King did not have the slightest reaction. Feng Ji's voice was hoarse and choked as he called out the barbaric Bloodbone King's name. She clenched her fists tightly, her eyes filled with unswerving determination. Agu, I won't let you die. I absolutely won't let you die. She raised her hand. A stream of flame-like light flashed across his fingertips. Bit by bit, she sweeps the wrists, the fingers. Then he stroked his neck, his ears. Immediately after, rays of light shot out. Yiqing Luo, who was hiding at the entrance of the cave, was pierced by this ray. Then, she saw the top of Feng Ji's head. 5 flaming red objects were floating in the air. A ring. It was a bracelet that looked like a line of blood. It was a bright necklace. A pair of ruby earrings. It was a transparent jade pendant with flickering flames. Following the release of the woman's profound energy, The blazing light emitted by the 5 ornaments slowly formed a line. Seeing this scene, Yi-Ching Luo almost jumped out of the cave entrance. Her eyes widened in shock. He looked at Feng in disbelief. She would never mistake those 5 ornaments. Azure Water Divine Artifact. Azure Water 5-piece set. The ring and the bracelet were exactly the same as the one she was wearing. Why was the Azure Water 5-piece set on Feng? She can still use these 5 divine artifacts? And it was obvious that Feng Ji's control over the god weapon was much more proficient than hers. She remembered the vast water divine artifact was a divine artifact forged by the divine emperor. Could it be the woman in front of her, named Feng was actually the divine emperor? This thought made Yi-Ching Luo totally stunned. Right from the start, she had been suspicious of Feng Ji's identity. But the memories changed too quickly, so she didn't go to investigate further. Download address. Phone reading. Chapter 4500. Now, when he strung all these things together, she was absolutely sure that Feng was the emperor of divine emperors. Yi-Ching Luo stared blankly at the 5 vast water divine armaments. He stared blankly at the lady who was controlling the divine weapon with her eyes closed and injecting its power into the brute Bloodbone King's body. His heart suddenly beat faster. The emperor of divine emperors, it was possible that they were her relatives. From the moment he saw the murals, she knew that there was a connection between her and the emperor of the divine emperor. He was also guessing. What was the relationship between him and the divine emperor? When he saw the emperor of the divine emperor himself, she had an intuition. She was definitely related to the emperor of the divine emperor. This kind of feeling made her heart beat faster and her eyes sour. They were all deeply confirming one thing. The emperor of the divine emperor was her family. No wonder. Ever since she first met Feng she had felt an indescribable sense of familiarity from Feng. In the previous memory, everything that Feng had done to the Bloodbone Barbarian King, she had always felt that it was strange. He couldn't believe that Feng was such a person. It was an intuition that came from the depths of his soul. Yi-Ching Luo pursed her lower lips slightly as her eyes were fixated on Feng Ji's every move without blinking. Want to unveil her veil. She wanted to see what this family member, who had a deep connection with her, looked like. Under Feng Ji's control, the power of the divine weapon slowly seeped into the Bloodbone Barbarian King's body. Coupled with the assistance of elixirs, the external injuries of the Bloodbone Barbarian King were slowly recovering. In the next few days, Feng had been taking care of the Bloodbone Barbarian King in the cave. Every day, he persisted in using the power of the divine weapon to repair the barbaric Bloodbone King. And during this period of time, this memory did not jump to the next one. How long had Feng been taking care of him? Yi-Ching Luo squatted at the entrance of the cave for a long time. Feng didn't discover Yi-Ching Luo. Yi-Ching Luo didn't appear to disturb Feng. It wasn't that she didn't want to appear. Instead, in this memory, she was a non-existent person. If she appeared, this memory would be disrupted. She might not be able to find the true memories of the barbaric Bloodbone King. This part, he had the memories of the divine emperor. She wanted to know the love and hate entanglement between the divine emperor and the Bloodbone Barbarian King. He wanted to know why the emperor of the divine emperor had passed away. He wanted to know just what exactly had happened within this. A few days passed. The injuries of the Bloodbone Barbarian King had long since healed. However, he never woke up. His handsome face was like that of a sleeping demon. Even though he was in a deep sleep, he still exuded boundless coldness. Feng did not know the reason, but he thought of many ways. But it was useless. Yi-Ching Luo could roughly guess why the barbaric Bloodbone King hadn't woken up. He was afraid that he had locked himself in his own world, unable to walk out of that darkness. Because he could not accept the fact that Feng would kill him. He could not accept Feng Ji's cruelty to him. for the blood-bone barbarian king. If Fengge had made her attitude clear from the beginning and asked the barbaric blood-bone king to sacrifice for her, she would not have believed it. The barbaric blood-bone king will not hesitate to satisfy all of her requests. However, from the blood-bone barbarian king's point of view, Fengge was using him. Take advantage of his love. To achieve her goal, the barbaric blood-bone king was unwilling to wake up, unwilling to face this fact. This was a psychological problem. He could only let the barbaric blood-bone king walk out from the darkness himself. No one could help him. There's more at the back. I'm writing Baby will read it tomorrow morning, moi, into this chapter. Chapter 4501. On the morning of the 5th day, Fengge kept the divine weapon and wore it again. Her gaze fell helplessly on blood-bone barbaric king as she muttered softly, "When are you going to wake up? If you don't wake up, I'm leaving." As she said that, she lifted her leg and gave blood-bone barbaric king a light kick. "I've been out looking for you for several days. A Huang must be searching for my whereabouts. You're now a sinner in the god realm. I can't let A Huang find you, bastard. Your injuries have obviously healed, but you still pretend to be asleep." The lady's soft voice sounded like a complaint, but Yiqing Luo could tell. That was mixed with deep concern and helplessness. That was only when facing a real old friend, a brother, she would have this tone and attitude. Fengge really valued blood-bone barbaric king as a brother, a relative. Just as the lady was muttering beside blood-bone barbaric king, nagging about their past memories, the lady suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her entire body tensed up. The expression on her face also turned solemn and grave. A pair of enchanting eyes stared straight at the entrance of the cave. "Oh no, those people have found their way here." Fengge stood up abruptly. The blazing red dress was like a burning fire. Her aura was no longer as gentle as a little girl's, but rather, it was cold and sharp. She turned back and took a look at blood-bone barbaric king, who was lying on the ground. Her slender brows were tightly knitted into a bundle. "I can't let them discover your existence. Agu, wait for me. I'll go lure those people away." After Fengge finished her words, she quickly left the cave. Yiqing Luo shrank on the other side, and from afar she could see a huge wave of profound energy surging in the entire dense forest. Was it the God Emperor's men? They were here to look for Fengge. Or did they know that blood-bone barbaric king wasn't dead and wanted to hunt him down? Fengge's figure speedily headed towards the direction of the profound energy. But a moment later, the Shin wave on the other side slowly stopped. After that, the dense forest resumed its original peace. It looked like Fengge's appearance should have dissuaded those cultivators. Yiqing Luo retracted her gaze and looked towards the cave again. This look, she nearly fell from her hiding place, because it was unknown when the barbaric blood-bone king had woken up. He sat up straight, one hand on the back of his head, a puzzled expression on his handsome face. Yiqing Luo, she no longer wanted to complain about the direction of this memory. It was extremely melodramatic. Fengge left. The barbaric blood-bone king woke up. Wasn't this clearly to escalate the misunderstanding between the two of them? Yiqing Luo could guess the following plot, even with her toes. The barbaric blood-bone king thought that it was Fengge who had injured him. However, he didn't know that he had been saved by Fengge. Speaking from experience, Fengge had just left, so it was unlikely that he would return. If he came back, wouldn't the misunderstanding between the two be resolved? That Fengge from the previous plot. His ice-cold eyes and ruthless methods filled with killing intent didn't seem fake. But now, it was Fengge who had saved the blood-bone barbarian king, and his attitude was completely different from before. This was definitely a misunderstanding. However, based on the conversation between Ah Xian and Yiqing Luo when she first met the barbaric blood-bone king, this misunderstanding probably hadn't been resolved even after the sovereign of God Emperor had passed away. Otherwise, when the barbaric blood-bone king heard the sovereign of God Emperor's name, he would reveal such a disgusted and complicated expression. Chapter 4502. Moreover, the Bloodbone Barbarian King kept calling the Emperor of God Emperor's slut. In fact, he even built the Linglong Palace in an attempt to kill his way back to the God world. However, from the memories of the barbaric Bloodbone King, Yiqing Luo didn't feel that the barbaric Bloodbone King really hated Feng Ge. He was only using this method to convince himself to give up on Feng Ge. The reason he built the Nimble Palace was because he wanted to fight his way back to the God world. But in reality, all he wanted was an explanation from the beginning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have revealed such an expression after learning that the Divine Emperor had passed away. In the end, it even disappeared. Yiqing Luo finally understood now. Why was Dmo Xian so certain that the barbaric Bloodbone King would not harm her? Because of her relationship with the Divine Emperor. No matter what, the barbaric Bloodbone King would not do anything to her. It was no wonder, after the Bloodbone Barbarian King abducted her to the Heaven Realm, he gave her a supreme status and even handed over everything in the Gu residence to her. However, he did not meet her, because he didn't know what kind of attitude he should use to face her. She was related to the Emperor of the Divine Emperor. From the looks of it now, she began to sympathize with the barbaric Bloodbone King. The unrequited love is the most hurtful. However, he couldn't give up so easily. It was unknown whether the Bloodbone Barbaric King had awoken because it had subconsciously heard Feng Ji's words, "If you don't wake up, I'll leave," or it had already thought things through. In short, the barbaric Bloodbone King sat on the spot for a while before he stood up and walked out of the cave with a gloomy expression. In a dense forest, the thick, withered leaves covered all traces of people. The barbaric Bloodbone King swept his gaze around. He didn't discover anyone else. He also didn't smell the aura of the person he wanted to see in the air. He closed his eyes slightly. He was obviously disappointed. Sure enough, he was deeply in love with the Divine Emperor, even until now. The Bloodbone Barbarian King was still hoping to see Feng Ge. He wanted to hear her explanation, even if it was a made-up explanation. As long as she said it, he would believe it. The barbaric Bloodbone King stood in the dense forest for a long time. Standing there, Yiqing Luo felt the earth shaking and the space in front of her started to distort. It was time to switch memory spaces again. This time, Yiqing Luo automatically closed her eyes. The feeling of that darkness penetrating his eyes was very uncomfortable. When the feeling of the earth shaking and mountains shaking disappeared, Yiqing Luo then slowly opened her eyes. He adjusted himself to the brightness of the light. He scanned his surroundings. She was now in a huge mansion. It was resplendent and luxurious. She looked very familiar. This was the bone residence that she lived in when she was in the Heaven Realm. Yiqing Luo was trying to figure out what time this memory was from. In an instant, he had gone from the God Realm to the Heavenly Realm. However, at this moment, the Gu residence was extremely gloomy. It was such a huge venue. Not even a shadow of a person could be seen. It was empty, silent, and the atmosphere was a little strange. Yiqing Luo followed her memory and found the Bloodbone Barbaric King's courtyard. He had yet to get close. Her hand was suddenly grabbed by a force. His entire person was suddenly pulled into the darkness. Yiqing Luo was on high alert as she turned her hand to attack the person behind her. However, when he caught a glimpse of a black figure out of the corner of his eye, he stopped. She frowned and looked behind her. What came into view was the palace lord of the secluded palace who was shrouded in a black robe. In the darkness, he looked even more sinister. Chapter 4503. Yiqing Luo's eyes sunk. "It's you." The palace lord's hand was still clasping her arm. His eyes under the black robe were slightly dark. "Didn't I say not to follow?" Yiqing Luo raised her brows. "You say no, and I won't follow? The current owner of the bone residence seems to be me. You barged into my territory." The palace lord's emotions fluctuated, as though there were some ups and downs. After some time, he sighed helplessly. "You shouldn't have come in. Bloodbone Barbaric King's memory is your motive?" Yi Qing Luo flung his hand away as her lips curled into a cold arc. How is it? Have you seen what you wanted to see? The palace lord wanted to say something, but when the words reached the tip of his tongue, he swallowed it back. In the end, he only spat out 3 words, not yet. Yi Qing Luo scoffed lightly, as her long and narrow eyes didn't conceal her ridicule. Her gaze swept past the blood-bone barbaric king's courtyard. The ridicule in her eyes deepened. If I ask you, what is the palace lord of darkness trying to get from the blood-bone barbaric king? Will you answer? The palace lord of darkness raised his head slightly. The black robe covered his face, and his current emotions couldn't be seen. His voice was slightly hoarse. What did you see? He didn't answer, but asked back. Yi Qing Luo didn't hide, as she was very straightforward, blood-bone barbaric king's memory. She paused, as her long and narrow eyes curved. Don't tell me. You didn't see it? If you'd seen earlier, those memories between the blood-bone barbaric king and the sovereign of gods. At this moment, he definitely wouldn't ask like this. For a long time, there was no response from the other party. This was also indirectly confirmed. The other party was indeed. She didn't see anything. Yi Qing Luo suddenly laughed. Looks like Palace Lord's luck isn't too good. You finally got by May as a sacrifice to open the blood-bone barbaric king's sealed memory entrance. But in the end, you didn't get anything. What did you see? He asked again, as his voice became much heavier. Yi Qing Luo shrugged. I naturally saw something that you didn't, of course. I can't tell you. Yi Qing Luo. He suddenly spoke in a serious tone. Tell me now, what exactly did you see? If you tell me now, perhaps I can still guarantee your safety for the time being. But after this, I can't predict how Master will treat you. Yi Qing Luo's eyes curved into a smile. You want to know? Why don't you tell me what you palace's goal is? What does you palace want? He fell silent once more. Yi Qing Luo's brows curved slightly as her lips curled up, revealing a hint of slyness and ridicule. Since you're not willing to answer, then let's forget about this deal. After Yi Qing Luo finished her words, she didn't look at the palace lord of Seclusion Palace. The man behind him had no intention of asking any further questions. The atmosphere turned silent once again. There was an awkward atmosphere in the air. After a while, the palace lord of Ethereal Palace then retracted his thoughts as he frowned slightly and opened his mouth. Yi Qing Luo, even if you don't say it now, when Master makes a move on you, should be careful. Suddenly, a cautious voice was heard from not too far away. She saw a 30 to 40-year-old middle-aged man, leading 2 male servants, carefully walking towards Bloodbone Barbaric King's courtyard. Chapter 4504. The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace immediately kept quiet. Both of them quietened down as they looked at the person in front of them vigilantly. The middle-aged man and the manservant didn't notice the 2 people in the dark as they whispered to each other as they walked. Your daily task is to clean up Bone Lord's courtyard and send the 3 meals to his door. Do you understand? The 2 servants nodded obediently, but there was still a look of fear on their faces. Don't be afraid. The middle-aged man comforted them. As long as you don't make any noise when you work and disturb Bone Lord, you will be safe and sound. Although they said that, their faces were still very pale. You should feel lucky to work in Bone Lord's courtyard. As long as you pay attention and don't disturb Bone Lord, your monthly allowance is higher than others and your life will be much easier. The middle-aged man continued. You 2 are smart kids. Just pay attention. As he said that, the middle-aged man sent the manservant to Bone Lord's courtyard and left. After the middle-aged man left, the 2 manservants looked at each other in dismay. Then they looked at Bone Lord's direction. The 2 of them walked into the courtyard silently. Yi Qing Luo, who was in the dark, raised her brows when she saw this scene. Those 2 manservants didn't look as innocent and harmless as they looked on the surface. They acted so afraid in front of the middle-aged man. But when the middle-aged man left, the 2 of them walked into the courtyard without any hesitation. Interesting. This was a sign that something was going to happen. The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace glanced at Yi Qing Luo's honeyed smile and frowned slightly. "What are you smiling at?" Yi Qing Luo didn't turn back to look at him as her gaze was fixed on the two manservants. "There's a good show to watch. I'm happy." "Good show?" The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace frowned in puzzlement, just as he finished his words. Soon after, the two servants quickly approached the Bloodbone Barbarian King's room. Their speed was so fast that it wasn't something an ordinary manservant could possess. The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace was stunned for a moment as his gaze stopped on Yi Qing Luo for a moment, as though he was puzzled why Yi Qing Luo knew that there was something wrong with those two manservants. After looking for a long time, he didn't see anything strange. Yi Qing Luo didn't bother about him. Only then did he turn his eyes back to the servant. The two servants were clearly well-trained. One on the left and the other on the right, they leaped to the door of the barbaric Bloodbone King's room. One of them took out a bamboo tube and inserted it into the window. The servant placed his mouth on the bamboo tube and was about to put the medicine in. Suddenly, his expression changed. He abruptly left the bamboo tube and leaped backwards. The servant's body fell heavily to the ground. Black blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. When the other servant saw this, he looked at the bamboo pipe that was stuck in the window but did not move at all. Realizing something, he quickly turned around and wanted to escape. But just as he made his move, the tightly shut door suddenly opened. A terrifying, profound light shot out from a door. In an instant, the servant who had escaped was brought back. A tall and straight figure walked out of the room. The Bloodbone Barbarian King looked dejected. His brocade robe was covered with wine stains, and his long black hair was messy like a chicken's nest. He didn't know what else was stuck on it. How could he still have the elegance he once had? But no matter how disheveled and dejected he looked, the moment he walked out, the frightening aura emanating from his body was enough to intimidate people's hearts. When they saw him, the two servants who had fallen on the ground immediately climbed up and looked at the Bloodbone Barbaric King vigilantly. End of this chapter. Chapter 45:05. Who are you? What's your purpose in approaching me? The barbaric Blood King's voice was cold. The servants looked at each other. One of them wiped the blood off his lips, got up, and slapped the direction of the barbaric Blood King. The other quickly surrounded the barbaric Blood King from behind. The two servants showed their killing moves when they attacked. The barbaric Blood King sneered, his eyes full of contempt. In the face of his servant's attack, he did not even budge an inch. Standing on the spot, he casually waved his sleeves. The powerful dark wave was like a surging wave. With a bang, he stood in front of the two servants, blocking their way. The two servants were thrown to the ground by the powerful force, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. We were just ordered to test Bone Lord's identity. The servants knew that they were no match for the barbaric Blood King, so they immediately lowered their stance. The first servant explained, because the name of Bone Lord is the same as the sinner from the divine realm. So someone offered a high price to let us test the relationship between you and the sinner from the divine realm. Sinner? The barbaric Blood King's eyes darkened and a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. We know that you're definitely not that sinner, but the other party offered a high price, so we just came to test. The second servant hurriedly said. The barbaric Blood King frowned slightly and did not speak for a long time. The expression on his face was very indifferent. The silent look on his face. This caused the two servants to tremble in fear. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable fear and dread. They did not expect the strength of this person called Bone Monarch was actually so high. Trembling with fear, they waited for the barbaric Blood King's verdict. However, the barbaric Bloodbone King's expression did not change as he turned around and returned to his room. With a bang, he closed the door once again. The two servants outside the door were dumbfounded. What did this mean? Bone Lord did not kill them and did not intend to punish them? Could it be that he let them go? The two servants stared at each other blankly for a long time. Finally, they carefully walked out of the courtyard. With a limp and a tentative step, he turned his head back with every step. He walked out of the courtyard. No one stopped him. The two servants shuddered in fear and eagerly wanted to escape. Just as they supported each other and were about to leave, a hand suddenly appeared in front of them. Then, a black shadow flashed past his eyes. They only had time to see a black robe. Then his feet left the ground. He could hear the sound of the wind whistling in his ears. By the time their feet touched the ground again, they saw a figure shrouded in a black robe and emitting an austere aura standing before them. The two servants were so scared that their legs went soft. They knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. "Bone Lord, spare us. Bone Lord, spare us. We won't dare to do it again. We won't dare to. If you listen obediently, no one will kill you." Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice of a woman entered their ears. The two of them were stunned, and their begging and wailing stopped abruptly. He looked in the direction of the voice. Behind the black-robed man, a fairy-like woman in fiery red clothes walked out and looked at them with a smile. That smile was bright and dazzling, but the two only felt an inexplicable chill on their backs. "You, who are you?" the servant asked in horror. Chapter 4506. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a smile. "You don't need to bother about who we are. As long as you answer my questions obediently, you will be safe and sound." The two attendants exchanged glances, weighing the strength of both sides. Although he really couldn't tell how strong the black-robed man and the young and beautiful woman were, he still couldn't tell. But in terms of their temperament, the two of them decisively chose to be obedient. "Ask away," from the mouths of the two servants. Yiqing Luo roughly understood the current situation. It was probably, from the memories before that, Feng Gu heavily injured the blood-bone barbarian king and announced to the public the divine emperor had personally suppressed the blood-bone barbarian king and annihilated it. From now on, there will no longer be a barbaric blood-bone king. As for the matter of Feng Gu saving the blood-bone barbarian king, no one mentioned it at all. Other than Feng Gu himself, no one knew that the barbaric blood-bone king was still alive. This explanation matched up with a version which Yiqing Luo had heard from Dmo Xin previously. However, Yiqing Luo expressed that there must be something that she didn't know. After all, it was the barbaric blood-bone king's memory. There were some things that the barbaric blood-bone king didn't know. She couldn't see it either. He could only imagine and guess. Yiqing Luo looked at the two footboys for some time and asked again, "Since Bone Lord has already died in God Realm, why do you still want to probe that Bone Lord's identity?" The two servants hugged each other and explained while trembling. This bone mansion had suddenly appeared in the heaven realm. No one knew the identity of the master of the bone mansion. However, looking at the luxurious decorations of the Gu residence, it was clear that he was not an ordinary person. There were also profound practitioners who wanted to occupy the Gu residence's territory. They were heading to the Gu residence to stir up trouble. There was only entry and no exit. At first, there were people who didn't believe it. However, as more and more profound practitioners disappeared from the world after entering the Bone Mansion, as time passed, no one dared to take half a step into the Gu residence. As a result, the Bone Mansion became a strange and mysterious existence. Everyone in the Heaven Domain's ancient city was very curious about the Bone residence, but no one dared to test him. There was once when someone outside the Bone residence shouted the words Bone Lord. Everyone knew. The master of this Bone Mansion was called Bone Monarch. However, no one had ever seen this person called Bone Lord. Bone Lord. This name was exactly the same as the name of the sinner who had been suppressed by the divine emperor and reduced to ashes. However, no one would lump the two Bone Lords together. After all, the Emperor of the God Emperor had personally said that the sinner of the God world had already been reduced to ashes. However, the two servants expressed that they also did not know the appearance of the person who made the bid. They also did not know why that person would be so interested in Bone Lord. They took the money and entered the Gu residence to do their work. That person When did he look for you? Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she asked. The servant replied, 3 days ago. 3 days. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed past a meaningful smile as she asked again. Then have you all heard of the matter regarding the Bone Lord being annihilated by the sovereign of God? The manservant was stunned. He shook his head and said, That's a matter of the immortal realm. How can we, the people of the heaven realm, get any information? Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she seemed to be thinking about something. Manservant B suddenly thought of something as he patted his head. Speaking of this, I did hear a few seniors mentioning about the gossip in the immortal realm. But whether it's true or false, I dare not guarantee. Please remember this book's domain name. Com. Wonderful Bookhouse mobile version website. Com. Chapter 4507. Tell me about it. Yiqing Luo wasn't sure which period of time she had entered into this memory, but based on her current speculation, it should be at least half a year or more since that memory. Half a year. Bloodbone Barbaric King had yet to recover from Feng Ji's serious injury. Look at his dispirited look. Apparently, he didn't know that he was saved by Feng Ge. Yiqing Luo really wanted to rush out and tell Bloodbone Barbaric King the truth. Unfortunately, this was only a memory that had been born. It wasn't a real world. Even if it changed the story in the memory, it couldn't change the fact that it had been born. Servant B recalled his senior's words and said, I heard that. The Emperor of God fell in love with someone and gave birth to a child. Yiqing Luo nodded. This piece of news was indeed true. Feng Ge was indeed pregnant and gave birth to a child for that person called a Huang. It seemed that this servant B's news was not fake. I heard that everyone in the God realm was trying to find out the identity of the person who fell in love with the Emperor of God. But it seemed that no one knew who that person was. But later on, it was said that the Emperor of God's child had disappeared and the child's father had also disappeared. Now the God realm is in a mess and the Emperor of God is looking for his child everywhere. Servant B's words made Yiqing Luo's eyes move slightly. The child was missing, and that person called a Huang was also missing. The child's father had run away with the child. After Servant B finished, he looked at Yiqing Luo carefully. I have said what I should say now. Now can we? Yiqing Luo waved her hand. The two of them were in a hurry to escape. The palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace looked coldly at the two figures who were leaving and turned to Yiqing Luo. You believe what he said? Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Why not? There is no need for the servant to lie. What's more, the God realm and heaven realm were separated by thousands of miles. They were two different worlds. For the heaven realm to know of any news in the God realm, it would at most be an extremely explosive event. It was true that the divine emperor was pregnant and had a child. The disappearance of this child and the child's father in the God realm might not be fake. However, why would this memory appear in the barbaric Bloodbone King's memory? Could it be the disappearance of Feng Ji's child had something to do with the barbaric Bloodbone King? The person who probed if the Bloodbone Barbarian King was the Bone Lord of the Divine World was also someone from the Divine World? Or perhaps Feng Ji's men? No, it shouldn't be. At that time, when the two servants approached the Bloodbone Barbarian King's room, their bodies carried a murderous aura. Then he attacked the barbaric Bloodbone King. It was also merciless. If it was Feng Ji's people, it was absolutely impossible to kill the Bloodbone Barbarian King. She had a nagging feeling that there was something in all of this that she had overlooked, or perhaps she had yet to understand. Did you think of something? The palace master of the Netherworld Palace noticed the change in the girl's expression. Yiqing Luo kept her thoughts as she raised her eyes to look at him. Meeting with that pair of deep black eyes, she couldn't see through his emotions. Her lips curled slightly, revealing an arc that didn't look like a smile. Whatever I thought of has nothing to do with you. / Sogu. Chapter 4508. Yi Qing Luo, now that we're in the same place, we're on the same boat. The palace lord of the Netherworld Palace didn't like this feeling of being isolated by Yi Qing Luo. When Yi Qing Luo heard that, she couldn't help but laughed out. Don't. You and I are not the same kind of people, and our motives are different. She laughed and took 2 steps back. He widened the distance between him and the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Then, she looked at him with a smile. You want to find the secrets in the blood-bone barbaric king's memories for the palace of gloomy darkness. As for me, I'm just here to take a look and see if I can give you some trouble. She paused and spread her hands. So, we're actually standing on opposite sides. The palace master of the secluded palace stared at her with a hurricane in his eyes. Yi Qing Luo tilted her head as the corners of her lips curled upwards, as she continued with a beaming smile. So, what do I know? How could I possibly tell you? Yi Qing Luo. The palace lord's voice had sunk a lot. His hands, under the black robe, clenched into fists. He seemed to be suppressing some sort of emotion. His gaze towards Yi Qing Luo grew deeper and deeper. Don't shout at me. It's useless. Yi Qing Luo dug her ears. Why don't we have a fight? If you win me, I might tell you what I know. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace was obviously depressed. You know that I won't do anything to you. No, I don't know. Yi Qing Luo hurriedly waved her hands, putting on an expression as though she wanted to cut off all relations with him. Don't portray yourself to be so affectionate in front of me. Yi Qing Luo. The palace lord's tone became heavier, unable to accept Yi Qing Luo's increasingly incisive words. Facing his anger, Yi Qing Luo didn't have much of an emotion. She indifferently curled her lips and waved her hand at him. All right, let's disperse here. Go and complete your mission. You're not coming with me? The palace master of secluded Darkness Palace pursed her lips. Do you think that by following me, you will be able to learn things that you can't? Yi Qing Luo rolled her eyes at him. If I don't want you to know, and don't want Secluded Palace to succeed, do you think there's any use for you to follow me? The palace master of the Netherworld Palace's mouth moved. He did not want to be separated from Yi Qing Luo. But what Yi Qing Luo said was right. Between him and Yi Qing Luo, it was an opposing situation. He came here. It was an order from his master. This was his mission. As for Yi Qing Luo, she naturally wouldn't allow him to complete the mission so easily. In the end, he didn't say anything. Yi Qing Luo only gave a sarcastic smile. Then, he turned around and disappeared in front of the palace master of Gloomy Palace. Far away from the palace master of Gloomy Palace, Yi Qing Luo felt that the air was much fresher. There was a person who was watching her, and there was a high possibility that he was behind her. No matter how he thought about it, he felt goosebumps and uneasy, although he wouldn't really hurt her. But this kind of injury was only not a threat to her life. As for the rest, it was hard to say. Yi Qing Luo returned to the Gu residence. He found the courtyard of the blood-bone barbarian king with ease. At this moment, the courtyard was quiet. It was no different from when Yi Qing Luo left earlier. The footboy's blood was still on the ground. It could be seen that the blood-bone barbarian king did not open the door after the servant left. Yi Qing Luo concealed her presence. She quietly got closer to the Bloodbone Barbarian King's room. She wasn't sure if the Bloodbone Barbarian King would discover her approaching. Chapter 4509. After all, the strength of the 2 servants just now was not weak. He hadn't even gotten close. He was discovered by the Bloodbone Barbarian King. She did not think that her strength was above that of the Bloodbone Barbarian King. However, even if they were discovered by the barbaric Bloodbone King, she wasn't too worried. After all, she still had the teleportation secret technique to save her life. But when Yi Qing Luo tried to get closer, there was no movement in the room. Yi Qing Luo walked as she tried to go around to the back of the room. Then, he tried to open a window at the back. As soon as he opened the window, the smell of alcohol assailed his nostrils. The interior of the house was dark, and it was impossible to see the surroundings clearly. There was a moment of silence. The people in the room didn't seem to notice the commotion outside. Yiqing Luo lifted up her skirt and squeezed into the window. The stench of blood and alcohol in the room was unbearable. Yiqing Luo covered her mouth and nose as she frowned as she walked in. She had entered the Bloodbone Barbarian King's room no less than 100 times in the Gu residence. As for the furnishings inside, he could practically come and go with his eyes closed. The room in her memory was exactly the same as the one she had seen before. Bang! There was the sound of something falling to the ground. Yiqing Luo was shocked. Soon, the room became quiet again. She remained silent for a long time before approaching the direction of the sound. He bypassed the bedroom. Yiqing Luo walked to the front of the main hall. In the darkness, he could vaguely see a human silhouette lying on the ground, motionless. It was the barbaric Bloodbone King. Was he drunk? Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes slightly as she hid herself behind the pillar. After an unknown amount of time, the barbaric Bloodbone King finally moved. He moved. There was the sound of bottles clinking. It could be seen that there were a lot of wine bottles and wine glasses beside him. He struggled to get up from the ground. The sound of bottles crashing into each other could be heard as they fell to the ground. In the quiet and dark room, it was extremely ear-piercing. He staggered to his feet and groped for a moment on the table. Finally, he found a bottle of wine. He began to gulp down the wine again. Before the pot of wine was finished, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. He suddenly fell limp to the ground again. The wine pot fell to the ground, filling the room with the fragrance of wine. The broken pieces of the wine flask splashed towards Yiqing Luo's feet. This was simply the rhythm of leading a befuddled life. He drank when he woke up, slept when he was drunk, and continued drinking when he woke up, no matter how good one's physique was. If this went on, that's still alcohol poisoning, right? It was estimated that ever since the barbaric Bloodbone King came to the Heaven Realm, it had maintained this state. Looking at the Bloodbone Barbaric King's current state, he really did look like he had fallen out of love. Yiqing Luo squatted behind the pillar for quite some time. The Bloodbone Barbaric King was indeed drunk and unconscious. She simply walked out from the darkness. However, the moment she moved, there was no reaction yet. The sound of wine pots clinking against each other could be heard. In the next instant, a black shadow attacked him. The strong smell of alcohol filled his nose. Her wrist was tightly clasped by a cold hand. F*CK. Yiqing Luo let out a curse as she abruptly clasped that icy cold hand, trying to avoid it. But that strength was extremely strong. It was as if he was grabbing her hand and pulling her whole body into his arms. The smell of alcohol almost made Yiqing Luo faint. Was this barbaric Bloodbone King pretending to be drunk, deliberately luring her out? Yiqing Luo cursed in her heart and was about to teleport away. Suddenly, she heard a choked voice transmitted into her ears. Feng Ge, hurry up and read the latest update. Download address. Phone reading. Chapter 45:10. Feng Ge? He was calling. Feng Ge? Yiqing Luo's movements paused slightly. This pause made Bloodbone Barbaric King's arms hug her tightly. That strength almost kneaded Yiqing Luo into two halves. Yiqing Luo wanted to struggle, but just as she moved, Bloodbone Barbaric King panicked and increased his strength. He hugged her even tighter. As he hugged her, he spoke in a choked voice. Feng Ge, don't be angry with me. Feng Ge, I know I'm wrong. Don't leave me. Don't. Yiqing Luo, Bloodbone Barbaric King, had treated her as Feng Ge. She stopped struggling. Bloodbone Barbaric King then calmed down a little. Feng Ge, you came to look for me. You still came to look for me. You can't let go of me, right? Yiqing Luo felt uncomfortable being hugged, but she didn't dare to struggle too much. She could only purse her lips and said word by word. Let go of me first. You're using too much strength and it stinks. Her words made Bloodbone Barbaric King stiffen. Yiqing Luo's heart also jumped. Could it be that her voice was different from Feng Ji's and Bloodbone Barbaric King could tell, she immediately became vigilant. But unexpectedly, Bloodbone Barbaric King quickly let go of her and took a step back, like a child who had done something wrong. He lowered his head. Fengge, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Don't be angry with me. I won't touch you, I won't touch you. As he said that, he lowered his eyes to look at his messy body. He hurriedly tugged at his clothes, as though he wanted to take it off, but Yiqing Luo was around. I'm going to change now. He had just taken 2 steps when he hurriedly swayed his body back. No. If I leave, what if you leave too? That careful look made Yiqing Luo inexplicably uncomfortable. Bloodbone Barbaric King. He really loved Fengge. This was the first time she saw Bloodbone Barbaric King put himself in such a lowly position. Even when he was facing Fengge, he didn't care. She had never been in this way. Yiqing Luo sighed. Don't go change, go rest. No, I don't need to rest. Bloodbone Barbaric King's emotions tensed up. Are you leaving? You still don't intend to forgive me. You still don't intend to take me back with you, right? Yiqing Luo frowned. What kind of plot development was this? According to the previous memories. No, the Bloodbone Barbarian King had misunderstood that Fengge wanted to kill him. After that, he should be filled with resentment. Why was he the one apologizing now? Yiqing Luo really couldn't understand it. She looked at the clearly unconscious barbaric Bloodbone King. It just so happened that he could take this opportunity to sound him out. Yiqing Luo coughed lightly as she recalled Fengge's tone and asked, Don't tell me. You don't hate me? The barbaric Bloodbone King was silent. His head was lowered, and it was hard to see his expression in the darkness. After a long while, he slowly said, I don't hate you. I know that you blame me for doing such a heaven-defying thing. The words you said to me that day were all fake. It was all because you were angry at me. Yiqing Luo, this was just an excuse he came up with to make himself feel better, wasn't it? In that memory, Yiqing Luo couldn't tell. That Fengge intentionally said those angry words because he was angry at him. I won't do it again. Things that you don't like, I won't do it again. Bloodbone Barbaric King hurriedly raised his head as he swore seriously. Chapter 45:11. The next moment, his entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Fengge, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she wasn't the real Fengge. He also did not know what kind of mentality and thoughts Fengge, who had wanted to seriously injure and kill him, had when he attacked the Bloodbone Barbarian King. He also didn't understand why Fengge would exhaust his own strength to save the barbaric Bloodbone King from the gates of hell. The story of these two was too complicated and melodramatic. Yiqing Luo didn't answer. The Bloodbone Barbaric King muttered to himself. His tone was filled with fear and uneasiness. It's fine if you don't want me to return to the God realm. Then you can also find time to visit me. Yiqing Luo. Was he willing to be a kept man outside? Repeat 500 words, refresh in 20 minutes. The Yuan IP grand ceremony is too tempting. Sob, sob, sob. I was wrong. The next moment, his entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Fengge, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she wasn't the real Fengge. She wasn't sure what kind of mentality and thoughts Fengge had when he tried to injure and kill her, to take action against the Bloodbone Barbaric King. He also didn't understand why Fengge would exhaust his own strength to save the barbaric Bloodbone King from the gates of hell. The story of these two was too complicated and melodramatic. Yiqing Luo didn't answer. The Bloodbone Barbaric King muttered to himself. His tone was filled with fear and uneasiness. It's fine if you don't want me to return to the God realm. Then it's fine if you can find time to visit me. Yiqing Luo. Was he willing to be a kept man outside? The next moment, his entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Fengge, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yi Qing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she was not the real Feng Ge. He also did not know what kind of mentality and thoughts Feng Ge, who had wanted to seriously injure and kill him, had when he attacked the Bloodbone Barbarian King. He also did not understand why Feng Ge had exhausted all his strength to save the Bloodbone Barbaric King from the gates of hell. The story of these two people was too complicated, too melodramatic. Yi Qing Luo didn't reply. The Bloodbone Barbaric King muttered to himself. His tone was filled with fear and uneasiness. It's fine if you don't want me to return to the God world. Then, it's fine if you can find time to visit me. Yi Qing Luo, was he willing to be a kept man outside? The next moment, his entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Her voice was also very soft and slow. Feng Ge, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yi Qing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she was not the real Feng Ge. She also did not know what kind of mentality and thoughts Feng Ge, who had wanted to seriously injure and kill him, had when he attacked the Bloodbone Barbaric King. She also did not understand why Feng Ge had exhausted all his energy to save the Bloodbone Barbaric King from the gates of hell. The story of these two people was too complicated, too melodramatic. Yi Qing Luo did not answer. Chapter 45:12. Feng Ge held his arm tightly with both hands and looked solemnly at the Bloodbone Barbaric King. Her voice was hoarse and choked with sobs. I know. If it's Agu, he won't refuse any of my requests. Let me be selfish for the last time. You must take good care of my child. I only trust you. Only you can trust me. When she said this, her tone was filled with endless sorrow. What on earth happened? The Bloodbone Barbaric King sobered up a lot after hearing Feng Ge's solemn request. He shook his muddled head hard. Feng Ge, did something happen in the divine realm? This child, why? I don't have time to explain to you. Feng Ge hurriedly interrupted him, her face full of pleading and expectation. The only person I can trust now is you. I'll give the child to you. No matter who asks you for the child, you can't give it to him. Her eyes fell deeply on the child. It was as if she wanted to engrave the child's appearance in her heart. It was so painful and sorrowful. Agu, please, you must take good care of the child. After saying this, Feng Ge forcefully closed her eyes and withdrew her gaze from the child, without waiting for the Bloodbone Barbaric King to speak. Feng Ge had already rushed out of the courtyard and disappeared. The Bloodbone Barbaric King held the child in his arms and quickly chased after her. However, Feng Ge's figure, along with his aura, had completely disappeared. If it wasn't for the fact that the child in his arms had confirmed Feng Ge's appearance, the Bloodbone Barbaric King would have thought all of this was just a hallucination. The Bloodbone Barbaric King stood in the middle of the courtyard for a long time with the child in his arms. He couldn't come back to his senses. It wasn't until the child grabbed his hand and bit it in his mouth that the Bloodbone Barbaric King's consciousness came back. He stiffened his head and looked down blankly at the child in his arms. Wrapped in soft and warm satin, the little guy was really small. He was wrinkled and not very good-looking. The little chubby hand grabbed one of his hands and stuffed it into its mouth. Saliva stuck to his fingers. He couldn't feel the slightest bit of annoyance or impatience. Maybe it was because the little one had a pair of round, distinct black and white eyes. Because he was extremely similar to Feng Ge. The barbaric Bloodbone King stiffened. He turned around and returned to his room with the baby in his arms. As soon as he stepped into the room, the baby squeaked and waved his little hands. He even wrinkled his little face. The barbaric Bloodbone King realized that the house was in a mess. Perhaps even the smell of the mass grave was not as bad as this house. He left the room and closed the door. Very quickly, the middle-aged man who Yi Qing Luo saw earlier, who brought along a manservant to the courtyard, who was also the butler of the Gu residence, brought along the cleaning staff. Then, he asked the barbaric Bloodbone King to bring the child to another clean house. As for the reason why the blood-bone barbarian king suddenly had another child, the butler was very tactful and did not ask any questions. The blood-bone barbarian king asked Gu San to look after the child, while he quickly went to wash himself, getting rid of the smell on his body. The group of people was extremely busy. Although she was a little flustered, she wasn't very good with children. But in the end, it was not a big mistake. However, that child loved to nestle in the arms of the barbaric blood-bone king. Giving Gu San a hug for a while, Gu San's face was grabbed a few times by the child. If it wasn't for the fact that the barbaric blood-bone king valued the child so much, Gu San would probably fly into a rage. Chapter 45:13. Yiqing Luo was in the dark, silently watching everything that was happening in front of her. The Gu residence's secret guards were walking back and forth. Bloodbone Barbaric King was walking back and forth, but no one had discovered her existence at all. If it wasn't for the fact that she was able to converse with the others in her memory. If it wasn't for the fact that Bloodbone Barbaric King would have mistaken her for Feng Gu when he was drunk, she would have suspected it. Bloodbone Barbaric King and the others actually couldn't see her. Otherwise, based on Bloodbone Barbaric King's ability and the Gu Residence's secret guard's ability, how is it possible that they hadn't detected her existence for such a long time? Yiqing Luo expressed a dazed look. After a day's worth of torment, Bloodbone Barbaric King fed and coaxed the child. He who had just become a father for the first time was already mentally exhausted. He placed the child by the side as he leaned against the head, gently caressing the little baby's head as he panted heavily. Until now, he still felt that all these were not real. All of a sudden, he had a child. Bloodbone Barbaric King lowered his eyelids as he gazed deeply at the little baby's sleeping face. His brows seemed to be tainted with a sliver of memories of the past. Your mother is really magnanimous to hand you over to me just like that. He burst out laughing. Wasn't she worried that I would take revenge on her child because of what she had done to me? This sentence ended. He chuckled in a low voice. But this laugh was filled with obvious pain. Of course she wasn't worried. From the start till the end, she knew how much I loved her, so she dared to hand you over to me without any worries. His hand gently caressed the baby's smooth and tender skin. The minute he touched that piece of softness, the strength of his fingers subconsciously lightened. He was afraid that if he wasn't careful, he would cut the little baby's tender skin. You are the same as your mother, heartless. Even in a stranger's house, you can still sleep so soundly. Bloodbone Barbaric King's tone had an obvious change. She knew that I had no way to force myself and hurt her heart right. His gaze towards the little baby became gentler and gentler. Her low murmur was also very soft. He slowly closed his eyes. His hand was still on the baby's shoulder, and his strength was very gentle. Although I don't know what exactly happened in the divine realm, and I don't know what happened to your mother, but since your mother handed you over to me, I will take good care of you. In his mind, the woman said it over and over again. I only trust you, and only you can trust me. The only person I can trust now is you. Believe she really did know about his feelings for her. After an unknown period of time, the barbaric Bloodbone King's breathing slowly calmed down. Inside the house, the two of them were sleeping soundly. Yiqing Luo stayed for a long time. Only then did he slowly walk out from the darkness. As she quietly approached, her eyes were fixed on the barbaric Bloodbone King. He did not disturb the Bloodbone Barbarian King, even when he reached the edge. She held her breath and looked past the Bloodbone Barbarian King to the little baby. It was a small ball. It was wrapped in a soft silk cloth. Little Zhao's chubby fingers had unknowingly grabbed one of the Bloodbone Barbarian King's fingers, not knowing why, where her gaze fell onto the little baby's upper body. Yiqing Luo's mouth was filled with an indescribable emotion, like something seemed to be burning in her chest. It wasn't that kind of scorching feeling. Just some kind of flame was fluctuating, surging bit by bit. Chapter 45:14. This feeling drove her bit by bit towards the bed. She wanted to see what this baby looked like. But just as her gaze was about to land on the baby's face, her eyes suddenly turned black. The ground beneath her feet shook violently. The earth shook and the surrounding space started to distort. Yi Qing Luo, mother of asterisk Kerr, was this intentional? At such a crucial moment, she changed the spatial memory. She purposely didn't want her to see what the baby looked like. Yi Qing Luo ridiculed endlessly in her heart. After the earth-shaking feeling, she opened her eyes again. She was no longer in the bone residence. What entered her eyes was a desolate mountain range. The surroundings were so desolate that there wasn't even a single tree. The sky was strangely oppressive and gloomy. Yi Qing Luo frowned as she surveyed the surroundings. Based on her previous experience, usually when she reached this place, coupled with the surrounding environment, Yi Qing Luo was certain this memory was going to stir up trouble again. The previous part was still half cruel and half sweet. Now, it was going to start the sadomasochistic mode. Yi Qing Luo, who had experience, indicated she didn't need to especially look for the brute Bloodbone King. Anyway, as an outsider who entered the brute Bloodbone King's memory, this memory would appear in front of her sooner or later. But there was a little doubt. Previously, when she met the Lord of Secluded Palace, he obviously wasn't clear about what she was talking about. Brute Bloodbone King's memory. Which meant, until now, the Lord of Secluded Palace hadn't seen. Brute Bloodbone King's memory. What she and the Lord of Secluded Palace had experienced was different. What was going on? Was it because the brute Bloodbone King's subconscious didn't want this memory to be known by the Secluded Palace? Then why? But she could clearly see every piece of memory, just as she was thinking. Suddenly, she heard a sound beside her ear. Yi Qing Luo's brows twitched slightly. The sadomasochistic love was about to begin. She surveyed the surroundings. In such a desolate place, she really couldn't find any place to hide. In the end, she could only climb to a higher mountain. From this angle, she could only lie on the ground to carefully look at what was happening below. The dense black aura gave off a cold, suffocating feeling. Below, a figure ran up first. That person was dressed in a black robe, and he was holding a baby in his arms. The strong winds blew against his sleeves. Profound waves rippled in the air. Monstrous waves surged. This terrifying, imposing manner made Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but hold her breath as she retracted her own presence even more. He lay on a huge rock, not daring to move. This scene was inexplicably familiar. Not waiting for Yi Qing Luo's mind to recall this familiar scene, a woman in a fiery red dress came quickly. Yi Qing Luo, there was no need to reminisce. This scene was exactly the same as when Feng Gu had heavily injured the barbaric Bloodbone King, except for the venue. Apart from the Bloodbone Barbarian King, there was a baby in his arms. Feng Gu held his long sword, his eyes cold as he stared at the barbaric Bloodbone King. No, more accurately speaking, she was staring at the baby in his arms. Yi Qing Luo gauged with her eyes from this distance. The baby was much bigger than when Feng Gu had carried him in her previous memory. Based on the time, it should have been more than 3 months. Give me the baby. Chapter 45:15. Bloodbone Barbaric King hugged the child in his arms tightly as a chilly intent flashed past his eyes. He carried the baby and had no intention to let go. What do you treat this place of mine as? His tone was extremely cold. Even his expression was so sunken that it wasn't the same as when he was facing Feng Gu. The atmosphere between the two of them was extremely strange. Both of them were entangled with each other, as though they wanted to suppress the other party. Yi Qing Luo's heart was filled with apprehension. She didn't know what had happened to Bloodbone Barbaric King to actually use such an attitude when facing Feng Gu. Even earlier when he displayed his forbidden skill and pretended to be evil to deceive Feng Gu. She had never seen such a chilly attitude. Between the two of them, was there any conflict? And why did Feng Gu use such an attitude to ask for the child from Bloodbone Barbaric King? And even using her long sword to point at Bloodbone Barbaric King? At that time, she was the one who sent the baby to Bloodbone Barbaric King, wasn't it? Below, the two of them were still confronting each other. Feng Ji's veiled face was filled with anger. Bloodbone Barbaric King, return the child to me. This is my child. Don't force me to make a move on you. Bloodbone Barbaric King's pupils contracted slightly. His ears were filled with Feng Ji's voice. Bloodbone Barbaric King. She called him Bloodbone Barbaric King. She didn't call him Agu. It was an exclusive title that belonged to her alone. Was she trying to break off relations with him? Bloodbone Barbaric King's heart was in turmoil. He clenched his fists tightly as his eyes were burning with anger. He lowered his head and looked at the baby who was giggling at him and waving his hands at him. The surging emotions in his eyes were even more intense, as though he was in an intense struggle. He had entered into a frenzied state. Return the child to me. Fonga saw that he didn't respond for a long time. The chilly intent in her eyes was filled with a thick, murderous intent. Her long sword moved and struck towards Bloodbone Barbaric King. Her action was clean and crisp without any hesitation. A dangerous aura shrouded Bloodbone Barbaric King. Bloodbone Barbaric King suddenly regained his senses as he raised his hand and waved out a burst of profound wave, blocking Feng Ji's attack. He held the baby tightly and leaped to the other side. Are you crazy? The child is still in my hands. What if he gets hurt? Feng Ji's attack just now. If he had been just a little slower, he wasn't the only one who was severely injured. Even this child would suffer a calamity. Did she hate and loathe him that much? You don't even care about your own child. That's my child. What I do has nothing to do with you. Feng Ji's words were cold and emotionless. Bloodbone Barbarian King, don't think that I don't know the reason why you won't return my child to me. She gripped her sword tightly, and the edge of the sword shone with a cold light. Isn't it because of that divine phoenix profound heart jade in her body? Feng Gu spat out word by word. His tone was filled with ridicule. Unfortunately, you've miscalculated something. The so-called divine phoenix profound heart jade is something that only the next divine emperor has the qualifications to use. Even if you hold the child in your hands, you still won't be able to display the true use of the divine phoenix profound heart jade. The Bloodbone Barbaric Monarch's face turned darker and darker as the woman continued to speak. His expression also became extremely ugly. The surrounding atmosphere fell into an icy cold state. And, at this moment, Yiqing Luo, who was sprawled on the huge rock. Her entire body was icy cold. Her heart was pounding violently. Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade. That baby's body contained the Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade. Chapter 45:16. Yiqing Luo's hand slowly pressed on her own heart. This place, there was also a Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade. She held her breath. There was an idea forming in her mind, but she didn't dare to think too much about it. He didn't dare to think about it, but his mind kept repeating the same words over and over again. The baby's body contained the Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade. In her body, there was the Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade. In this world, would two Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jades appear? She suppressed the surging emotions in her chest and looked down again. His gaze unconsciously fell on Feng Gu, the Emperor of Divine Emperors, Bloodbone Barbaric King. Quickly, give me the child. Feng Ji's stern voice interrupted Yiqing Luo's thoughts. At this moment, Feng Ji's eyes were overflowing with hostility. There was no trace of her usual gentleness and elegance. The barbaric Bloodbone King tightened his grip on the baby in his arms. His expression was cold. What did you just say? The Profound Heart Jade in this child's body is the Divine Phoenix Profound Heart Jade. Don't play dumb. If you didn't know the use of this child, why didn't you give him to me? Feng Gu sneered. The barbaric Bloodbone King's face turned ashen. He gnashed his teeth and glared at Chu Yang. You asked me for this child because of this profound heart jade? Feng Ji's eyes were full of disdain. Don't look at me like that. It's like I'm sorry. This is my child. I could do whatever I want. It has nothing to do with you. She waved her sword. The sharp blade shone with dazzling cold light under the reflection of the mystic light. Bloodbone Barbarian King, the current you is no match for me. The barbaric Bloodbone King's pupils suddenly contracted, and he looked down at the child in his arms. You, what do you mean by this? Feng Gu smiled coldly. Don't think that I don't know the consequences of using the forbidden skill. The pupils of the barbaric Bloodbone King contracted even more. Yes, after casting the forbidden technique, he would have to pay an equivalent price. There was no end to using forbidden techniques and cultivating forbidden techniques to make himself stronger. However, ever since he was injured by Feng Gu, after the baby was born, since then, he had never touched the forbidden art again. The reason he cultivated the forbidden technique was to protect Feng Gu. He wanted to dispel the restless factors that had ulterior motives towards a child in Feng Ji's womb. Later on, it was meaningless. Moreover, Feng Ji's child was born. After that, to the outside world, he was a dead man, sealed in the heaven realm, unable to go anywhere. He had no intention of continuing to practice forbidden techniques. Therefore, correspondingly, he needed to bear the pain of the backlash caused by the forbidden technique. The current him, perhaps in the heaven realm, he could be considered an expert. However, in the God world, it was simply not enough. Not to mention that his opponent was the emperor of the divine emperors. Furthermore, in the end, he could not bear to hurt her. Whether it was in the past or now, he was no match for Feng Gu. Give me the child. Seeing that the Bloodbone Barbarian King did not respond after a long time, Feng Gu had already lost his patience. He raised his long sword and thrust it towards the Bloodbone Barbarian King. The barbaric Bloodbone King was still immersed in his own thoughts and did not react at all, until the murderous long sword swept past his eyes. Only then did he suddenly react and raise his head. The sharp long sword was coming towards his face. Subconsciously, the barbaric Bloodbone King held the child in his arms tightly and quickly avoided the incoming murderous aura. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.